Please, ladies and gentlemen. Facciamo andare prima subito, capito? Adesso cerchiamo di... Please, take a seat. Are we ready to broadcast the video from the Carabinieri Tutela Patrimonio Culturale? Yes, I guess so. Wait 1 second, please take a seat. If you want to move forward a couple of rows, there are seats available. Okay, before giving the floor to General Riccardi, the commanding general of the special unit to protect cultural heritage in the Carabinieri Corps, we will have a video which showcase this unit. Please.
3rd of May 1969, the Artistic Heritage Protection Unit of the Carabinieri was born. The first police force in the world specialized in combating crimes against the cultural heritage. A tireless struggle which has rendered excellent results. From 1969 until today, numerous archaeological finds have been taken out of the underground market, antique treasures recuperated, and art forgeries seized. Breathtaking figures which crown years of relentless battles to safeguard a gallery of priceless masterpieces. The Carabinieri, for the protection of cultural heritage, operate under the functional direction of the Minister of Cultural Heritage and Activities and Tourism. This link, unique in the world of its kind, places the department at the center of a network of activities which accompany the more traditional police activities. The Carabinieri, in fact, collaborate with the superintendencies in the protection of the cultural heritage. They also offer advice for security on museum collections, archives, monumental and archaeological sites. The Carabinieri also collaborate in research projects with universities and scientific institutes, such as the National Research Council. Every day, men and women of the command, always in close synergy with all the components of the Carabinieri force, carry out preventive and security services on the Italian cultural heritage, so multifaceted, rich and widespread that it must be kept under constant control, such as the archaeological areas which are traditionally exposed to the attack of clandestine diggers. The continuous monitoring is carried out from the sky, on the ground and at sea. The command, headquartered in the capital, directly coordinates the operative department of Rome, which deals with wide-ranging and highly complex investigations at national and international level. For greater effectiveness, the operations department in Rome is divided into 3 different sections: archaeology, antiques, contemporary art and forgery. One of the strong points of the Cultural Heritage Protection Command is its articulation across the Italian territory in 15 units, coordinated nationwide by a group commander. The units have regional or interregional competence, and a section for Eastern Italy has been added to them. From Friuli to Sardinia, from Piedmont to Sicily, the command has steadily increased its capillary territorial presence through the years, as exemplified recently by the inauguration of the new units of Cagliari, Udine and Perugia. Rome too has a unit with specific territorial competence, and of recent institution within the command, the Training and Study Section, that follows the training activities that are increasingly being requested on the part of other countries. In more than 40 years of activity, the command, thanks to the work of the 3 sections of the operative department, territorial units, has achieved remarkable results. In fact, there have been numerous cultural assets recovered and taken out of the hands of crime. The command carries out numerous operations in the protection of the landscape and in the prevention of aggressive criminal acts in places of culture. Due to the richness of its archaeological heritage, Italy has always been plagued by the scourge of illegal excavations, an activity which leads to the irreversible destruction of archaeological contexts and their scientific knowledge. For decades, this scourge has been encouraged by a ruthless international market and an economic flow that has been truly astounding. Thanks to the investigative activities, this situation, however, has been radically changed in recent years. The criminal system has been reconstructed in its capillary structure and to a large extent dismantled. The warehouses of large international traffickers have been searched. Thousands of stolen artifacts have been confiscated, and a considerable quantity of documents has ended up in the hands of Italian investigators. Thanks also to the consultancy of the experts of the superintendents, it has been demonstrated that some important collectors and prestigious museums around the world had acquired archaeological relics stolen in Italy by means of illegal excavations, and the Ministry of Cultural Heritage and Activities and Tourism has been able to demand their restitution. Even in the field of antiquity, the command continues to work against crime and for the protection of cultural heritage. Each year, tens of thousands of goods, including paintings, sculptures, books and archive documents, coins, cabinetry and goldsmiths' works, are recovered and returned to the community. In recent times, the recovery of the 17 masterpieces stolen in 2015 from the Museum of Castelvecchio in Verona, Rubens, Mantegna, Pisanello, Tintoretto, have been able to return to the city after an absence of more than a year. The command has been present for some time on the international scene in military missions of peacekeeping. The men of the command have been operating in Iraq, where the preservation of the archaeological heritage has required the controlling of many very important historic areas under devastating attack of the clandestine excavators. Numerous appeals for the preservation of cultural heritage in areas of international crisis have prompted the Italian government to become a promoter of the institution of the Blue Helmets of Culture. In essence, this is a task force of experts composed of Carabinieri and of MIBACT technicians. To these are added experts from the Ministry of Education, University and Research, and by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation. Together they will intervene in areas affected by emergencies of any nature, man-made crisis or natural disasters, in a security frame. Thus, they will be able to support the authorities of the countries which request assistance in preserving archaeological sites, places of culture, and cultural heritage, in combating the international trafficking of cultural goods unlawfully removed, in preparing measures to limit the risks that a crisis or emergency may have on the cultural heritage of a nation. On October the 16th, 2015, with the approval by the UNESCO Executive Council of the resolution presented by Italy, the Unity for Heritage Task Force was created. On the 16th of February 2016 in Rome, UNESCO and the Italian government signed a historic agreement. Italy is the first country in the world to provide the international community with a group of professionals consisting of Carabinieri and MIBACT staff, the Blue Helmets of Culture. This group of experts has already worked to safeguard the cultural assets at risk after the earthquakes that struck central Italy in 2016. Italy has one of the richest artistic and cultural heritages in the world. This treasure can be protected, moreover, by a fundamental preventive action, its cataloguing and its knowledge. Without visual evidence, it is easy for stolen works to disappear forever in the labyrinth of the illicit market. For some time now, the Carabinieri have invited the owners of works of art to provide each object with a sort of identity card, the object ID, a summary sheet with photos which will allow, in case of theft, for a surer means of search. But when a cultural item is taken away from our heritage, a fundamental investigation tool comes into action, the database of unlawfully removed cultural assets. This gigantic computer archive is the result of the work carried out systematically by the men of the Cultural Heritage Protection Command for over the last 40 years. An archive unique in the world, which is being continually updated. This archive contains the information on more than 1,200,000 assets to be searched for, with over 600,000 images. And there are over 6,200,000 works of art which over time have been objects to be controlled. And today the relative information continues to be kept in the database contents. Thanks to this immense visual catalogue, in which every stolen object is filed with all the information possible, the investigators can constantly compare and update their research. Today, the database, thanks to innovative computer programs, is one of the most flexible and powerful of investigative tools. With the semi-automatic image comparison, the screening of hundreds of similar works can occur in real time. Part of the databank is available at www.carabinieri.it, and anyone can access more than 22,000 cultural assets to be searched for. In addition, the Command for the Protection of Cultural Heritage has created the Itpc application, unique in the world in its sector. Anyone can download Itpc on their smartphone or tablet and verify, among other options offered, if a work of art is sought after. The photograph taken by the user and loaded in the app, in fact, can be automatically compared with those present in the public interface of the database by any citizen in any part of the world. Thanks to the efficiency of its database, the Command for the Protection of Cultural Heritage has been a leader in the project SICE, Protection System for the Cultural Heritage, aimed at updating and implementation of the Interpol database of stolen works of art. The project, guided by Italy, was signed by 15 European states. It allows the standardization and automation of the exchange of information on stolen works of art. It aims to search for a more rapid and effective fight against international trafficking of cultural goods. The database is an essential tool of investigation, especially for those works that are not universally known, like the great masterpieces of art history, and which risk getting lost in generic categories, full of apparently undifferentiated objects. How does one trace a particular mass chalice or a crucifix among hundreds of similar items without having an adequate photographic or documentary support? Every day, the investigators monitor catalogues of auctions and exhibitions and websites, new areas in continuous expansion in the illegal market. It is a research which requires patience and persistence, because it's very unlikely indeed that a stolen item will immediately return in circulation, but often perseverance is rewarded. Thanks to the extensive experience accumulated by the Cultural Heritage Protection Command, today Italy is recognized as a world leader combating crime against the cultural heritage and its safeguarding. Latin America, the Far East, Eastern Europe, Africa and Asia. Many countries have requested the command to be able to study the Italian model and to activate training courses for their police. But the Carabinieri's training and didactic engagement does not stop here. To better protect the immense ecclesiastical cultural heritage, the Command has published, in agreement with the Pontifical Council for Culture of the Holy See, a handbook distributed all the world over, rich in information and advice for those responsible for the custody of the assets. The Command has also created, with ICOM, the International Museums Council, and MIBACT, a guide to prevention and security in museums. Moreover, the Cultural Heritage Protection Carabinieri continue to work for the raising of awareness, with participation in events and conventions of the sector. Frequent are the engagements in schools and the activity of dissemination through lessons and meetings with students. Finally, a fundamental role is played by their exhibition activity. Exhibitions organized by the Carabinieri not only permit Italian and foreign citizens to enjoy masterpieces that they feared forever lost, but they are indispensable vehicles for spreading the culture of legality. Among the most recent are the exhibition at the Palazzo del Quirinale, the Museum of Ancient Art of Palazzo Barberini, and the Galleries of the Uffizi. The Cultural Heritage Protection Command has in recent years received numerous awards, test to the importance of the work it carries out. On March the 25th, the President of the Republic conferred on the command the Gold Medal for its services to culture and art. But an even more important recognition took place on the 29th of May 2015, when the Gold Medal was conferred for the same merits to the Carabinieri Army flag. The cultural goods recovered by the command during its prestigious history constitute an immense patrimony, which could in itself constitute a museum unique in the world. But it would be of little importance that this museum were formed by celebrated masterpieces or small unknown objects created by great masters or by lesser-known artists, with precious or humble materials. What does matter is that the works, which seemed forever lost, return to their places of origin as fundamental testimonies to our collective identity. Like family members who return home after a long absence to continue the dialogue with us, to tell their stories and allow our stories to unfold in reflection. And this is the real treasure that the Carabinieri Command for the Protection of Cultural Heritage has been protecting ever since its creation.
Sir, now the floor is yours. Ladies and gentlemen, the commander of the Carabinieri Tutela Patrimonio Culturale, Brigadier General Roberto Riccardi. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Giuseppe, for the floor and for inviting me. And good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Well, according to the myth, to the poets, Mars and Venus were lovers. Actually, Venus had a husband, the god Vulcanus, but it's none of our business. What does matter here is that Mars, god of war, and Venus, goddess of beauty, cultural heritage, art, have always been enemies. Mars has always attacked Venus in terms of destruction and looting. Why? Looting. If you think of Troy War, the soldiers left for 10 years. They went far away from their homeland. They couldn't receive goods and food and what they needed for living and fighting from homeland. So they had to get from the place where they were. Destruction. Cultural heritage in the ancient times was mainly temples and statues of gods. So the occupying forces had to destroy the temples and the statues in order to settle down there and to put their own gods instead. That was the reason. But going directly to World War II, time have changed a lot. And I read, "Today we are fighting in a country which has contributed a great deal to our cultural inheritance, a country rich in monuments which by their creation helped, and now, in their old age, illustrate the growth of the civilization which is ours. We are bound to respect those monuments so far as war allows. If we have to choose between destroying a famous building and sacrificing our own men, then our men's lives count infinitely more, and the building must go. But the choice is not always so clear-cut as that. In many cases, the monuments can be spared without any detriment to operational needs. Nothing can stand against the argument of a military necessity. That is an acceptable principle. But the phrase military necessity is sometimes used where it would be more truthful to speak of military convenience or even of personal convenience. I do not want it to cloak slackness or indifference. These words were written by General Dwight Eisenhower, Commander-in-Chief of the Allied Forces, on the 29th of December 1943, during the Italy campaign, to his commanders. It is a well-known passage which underlines a great respect shown by the occupying force on the regards of the occupied country. It hasn't been always like that. Xenophon, in his Cyropedia, explains that when a city is captured by enemies, both the bodies of those on the city and their goods belong to those who capture it. Therefore, I'm quoting, "It is not by injustice that the winner acquires whatever it may get." Humanity has evolved since then. War with it, and international humanitarian law has tried and still tries to achieve the unachievable, make war more human, defend the helpless, protect the civilians from suffering. Cultural heritage is part of our humanity, and protecting it, even in military operations, even in warfare, means to protect our roots, our history, the identity of our communities. And this was well clear in General Eisenhower's vision of the Italian campaign. It took the institution of the Monuments Men, as we well know. That shared vision, in the end, led to the drafting of the Hague Convention and, within the decades, to its two protocols. After that, in peacetime, it was UNESCO which took care of the matter. Protection of cultural heritage almost disappeared from the horizon of military operators till the present days, when the crimes committed by ISIL and other criminal organizations against the cultural heritage of humankind sounded a wake-up call to the international community. Well, let's come to my unit. In the beginning, it was a small unit, yet it performed several cultural property protection tasks in military operation, as well as complex investigations, trying hard to underline that in cultural property crimes there is more than meet the eyes. I'm talking about the Carabinieri Command for the Protection of Cultural Heritage, the TPC. It was an isolated voice 52 years ago when we were born. The voice became a small group, then eventually a chorus of voices, which called for protection of cultural heritage in time of crisis, but also in peacetime, defending it from criminal organizations. And today, here we are, talking about cultural property protection in a conference hosted by the NATO Stability Policing Center of Excellence. Looking back to the days in which the TPC was collecting evidences from the looted museum of Baghdad, well, it's more than improvement. It's a change of perspective. CPP has regained its position as an operational tool, and it is not only about redefining battle space according to the existence of a cultural property. Of course, when you plan an operation on a foreign territory, you must take into account the existence of cultural property. When you operate on the ground, you must avoid unnecessary damage to local heritage. When you occupy a foreign territory, you have to prevent plunder of cultural heritage. But protection, in the sense in which the TPC intends it, is more than that. It means, for us, to protect the cultural heritage that we know and what we do not know yet, prevent the disappearance of the objects that are well known and studied, but also avoiding the looting of archaeological areas in order to preserve what still has to be discovered. But most of all, our job is working to recover what has been stolen and give it back to the original owner. Spoliation of archaeological sites, destruction of museums, churches and mosques, as well as libraries and other cultural places, deprive local population of their history, but also of means to survive. It jeopardizes the possibility of a future economy based on culture and enriches criminal organizations. Local looters and thieves are paid with trinkets, while, after a very long and complex process of laundering, the items perhaps looted from underground tombs are sold in auctions on the other side of the world for a fortune. It is a process in which the poorest stay poor and become even poorer by self-inflicting the damage to their community and country, while criminal organizations thrive in an area in which crimes very often go unpunished. Combating this system is not only a necessity, it is a moral obligation. The NATO Allied Joint Doctrine for Stability Policing defines SP as a set of police-related activities intended to reinforce or replace the indigenous police in order to contribute to the restoration of public order and security, rule of law, and the protection of human rights. Well, it sounds familiar to me. What we do is stability policing at its very heart. Defending cultural heritage means protecting human rights. It means contributing to the rule of law. It means to reinforce indigenous police. Occasionally, it even means to let indigenous police forces understand that those crimes exist. Because at times, it's still difficult to conceive the existence of this kind of crimes. And we have been doing it for 52 years. We have been performing stability police work even before the concept of SP was defined. Because protecting cultural heritage is what we do, is what we are. It is written down in our name. That is why I'm honored of being here today and very happy as well, because we are not alone anymore in considering protection of cultural heritage an important part of military operations. Only the dead have seen the end of war, reminded General MacArthur at West Point. Conflicts are a part of human life, and the only thing we can do is to mitigate the impact of conflict in order to guarantee a better future for the populations affected. Stability policing plays an essential role in this, and protection of a cultural heritage is, in our opinion, an essential part of stability police. Therefore, I'm sure that these 3 days of work will help in better define the ways in which the hard burden of protecting cultural heritage will be shared among all the players in the field during an operation. I cannot imagine a better place or time to find solutions to this complicated issue. Thanks again and good luck with the job.
Sir, thank you so much for your speech and for the video that you provided us with. I would like to present you with a piece, a couple of tokens of appreciation for your attendance today. I know that it was very difficult for you to find some time available because you are overstretched because of your business. So please let me...
I'm a slave.
First and foremost is the coin. So if I may, like this, not like this.
Ah, okay.
It's the tradition. Then we have a crystal cube. So, the crystal cube of the center. Right? It's a sort of lens as well. And then this is something which everybody will receive. Is a small masterpiece from the lithography from Mr. Sorry, it's not Mr. It's the master, Galliano Rossetto, who is very famous in this. So it's a reproduction of the most important square in Vicenza, Piazza dei Signori. Everybody, I trust, have already found it in your welcome package. So this is for you, sir.
Thank you. Very fond of us, I appreciate it.
Yes, this is number 4 of 80. So there are only 80 pieces.
I want to put it on eBay.
Questo si vuole usarlo. Grazie. Okay, now is the time, I think, for her patient of Mrs. Zeynep Gul Yunal. She is the Vice President of ICOMOS, the International Council of Monuments and Sites, and she's also the Vice President of the International Scientific Committee on Risk Preparedness within ICOMOS. So, Madam, the floor is yours. She's online.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and good afternoon to everyone. Actually, it was very interesting to listen all the presentations. It was very educative for me too. And I'm extremely honored to address you here today on behalf of ICOMOS International in this important meeting that brings defense, security, and heritage experts together. I know that many of you know ICOMOS, but I just shortly want to give a description about our organization schema. We are the, I can say that world's largest non-governmental organization heritage field around the world. And our mission is promote the conservation, protection, use, and enhancement of tangible and intangible heritage. And we are advisory body to UNESCO, to the World Heritage Committee on the implementation of the World Heritage Convention, besides ICCROM and IUCN. And we are serving since creation of 1965 with Global Heritage Network, with more than 11,000 heritage experts. That's our power is coming from all of our heritage expert members in 151 countries with 110 national committees. And we also have 28 international scientific committees. All of them is specialized in different subject and focus is different. And one of them is ICORP, International Scientific Committee on Risk Preparedness, as promotes the protection of cultural heritage from effect of natural disasters and conflict situations. We have in 37 countries with the experience in various aspects of disaster risk management and cultural heritage. And the ICORP member includes at least one from each UNESCO regions, because of the balancing the member involvement. And they work with our other organizations such as UNESCO, UN organizations like INSARAG, for integrated cultural heritage into disaster preparedness, response, and recovery phase. Also, ICOMOS International is a founding member of the Blue Shields, and ICORP is represented ICOMOS in that organization. If I describe our activities very shortly, giving a training for all phases of disaster risk management cycles, like mitigation, preparedness, response, and recovery phase, in both strategical, operational, and tactical level, like monitoring the situation in conflict zones, collecting information, kind of early warning, and also using the tools of cultural intelligence, documentation, reporting, like we are giving a report to UNESCO for the state of conservation reports in times of also the disaster times, and preventive measures, and also the more actively field support in emergency. And ICOMOS this year established a new working group for providing an effective response to crisis inside of ICORP, Crisis Monitoring and Response for Heritage Unit. This formation of working groups within the working method of ICOMOS is always arise out of necessity. As we all observe change in the trends of the latest cases, which are considered as a disaster in terms of scale and effect, which would be appropriate to define as like turbulent times, require the formation of some new reflex at the institutional level. In this new pattern, the crisis has been growing rapidly, and the impact of the consequences has the potential to change the nature of the trauma. The approach of overcoming the new generation problems in conflict that the situation will create in terms of cultural heritage and its users by monitoring via cultural early warning and the cultural intelligence formations, and if necessary by enabling to an early transition to the first intervention phase is a great importance. Our new working group focused on capacity building, monitoring as the response phase mostly, especially in crisis situation. We start to see the positive effect to allow for faster assessment and potential response with regards to helping protect our cultural heritage and communities, especially in case of crisis when the timely emergency response is of great importance. After all, we have all experienced in past trauma situation in conflict sites. The sooner the driving force of the cultural heritage come into play, the healthier the environment and the user's post-traumatic recovery phase. Actually, when we look at it from a global perspective, despite many efforts, we still need to reach clear answers for some questions. How should we interpret the numerical data of world's impact on urban population growth, number of refugees, borders of urbanized areas for future planning? We know that today, according to UN numbers, 55% of the world population living in urban areas, but its expected number till 2050 will be 68. It means that more conflict will take place, seems like will take place in the future in the urban areas. And also another question is, who is responsible and who lead the protection of cultural heritage in conflict times? What is the priorities? Even from my personal experience in the field, I usually observe that the security professionals and the emergency response professionals think that the cultural heritage protection is not included in their task description. Same way, heritage professionals think that the cultural heritage protection in critical times, in like hot part of the crisis situation, is under the first responders or security professionals' task. Most importantly, in some part of the cultures, tangible heritage like rituals, customs, or natural sacred sites define their culture and their priority. But for some culture, more tangible like monuments, artifacts is important for them. So when we look at from this perspective, cultural heritage protection have very wide description and need a more detailed action. So crisis time, cultural heritage protection still is a gray zone for both heritage and security fields. that we need to work on reduce the gray areas for visualizing more clear picture. Today, we all know that the protection of cultural heritage is also accepted as one of the biggest international security problems. We are, as ICOMOS, we are happy to collaborate on many platforms, like with the very kind invitation of the Nato shape in this March on 2021. We joined the state faith exercise, and since 2016, we are joining the EXCOM part of the exercise of the NATO. It's very important for us. We are learning a lot from that perspective too. And during this conference, experts of all related disciplines will share their experience in more detailed discussion. I know that from ground experience. We hope that the outcomes of this meeting can bring us one step closer to our common target, protection cultural heritage as a collective memories of humanities for peace. And we look forward to continuing to collaboration. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your intervention. It was very informative, very interesting. Now, we'd like to move on now as next speakers. We have two recorded video messages. So I would like the control room to put a presentation from ICCROM, International Center for the Study of the Preservation and Restoration.
Distinguished guests.
So are we ready to go? Yes. Okay, go ahead. Thank you.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, comrades and friends, it is with great pleasure that I'm addressing you on the occasion of the conference on NATO stability policing in cultural property protection. The United Nations defines peace building as a range of measures targeted to reduce the risk of lapsing or relapsing into conflict, to strengthen national capacities at all levels of conflict management, and to lie the foundation for sustainable peace and development. The emphasis on building a long-term and sustainable peace is what distinguishes peace building from the other activities of peacekeeping and peacemaking, which typically precedes this process. The aim of peace building is to go deeper in order to address the root causes of conflicts and to build a positive peace that is sustainable and includes all members of society. Heritage is an integral component of peace building, as its enjoyment and equitable access addresses the root cause of conflict, such as marginalization, segregation, a lack of employment, dissociation, and ownership. It contributes to post-conflict stabilization efforts and aims to strengthen trust and cooperation between armed forces and local populations. In recent years, as heritage has become weaponized to increase hostility and spread terror, new challenges have risen, drawing the attention of the international community and the many different actors involved in peace building on the importance of heritage property protection. ICCROM is an intergovernmental organization headquartered in Rome and currently has 137 member states. Its mandate is to contribute to building capacity worldwide in the management of heritage property by initiating, developing, promoting, and facilitating conditions for conservation. Amongst others, ICCROM promotes, develops, and provides training relating to the conservation and management of heritage property, and raises the standards and practice in this field. Please allow me to highlight how ICCROM contributes to the protection of heritage in emergency situations. First aid and resilience in times of crisis, or in terms of what we call FAR, is an ICCROM flagship program aimed at safeguarding heritage, associated communities, and reducing the risk of disasters and conflicts. FAR trains, builds knowledge, creates networks, increases awareness, and informs policies with an overall aim to reduce disaster risk for tangible and intangible heritage and associated communities. The program serves ICCROM's 137 member states by offering advisory services for protecting heritage before, during, and after a disaster or a conflict. The program motto, "Culture Cannot Wait," is grounded in the belief that by integrating heritage safeguards into wider programs for disaster risk reduction, humanity aid, peace building, and climate action, we can build peaceful and disaster-resistant communities. FAR is built upon 10 years of successful capacity development in the field of cultural heritage, first aid. Today, the FAR network of 500 cultural first aiders spans 83 countries. The program places emphasis on peace building and developing a people-centered approach for heritage safeguarding in conflict-affected areas, whilst working with security forces in close coordination. Some of the activities that ICCROM has conducted over the years include training for military through first aid courses and the training of the police and military in disaster situations. Allow me to share a short video with you showcasing the final exercises of a week-long international training course, First Aid Course to Heritage in Times of Crisis. This was developed by ICCROM.
2 days ago, a bomb went off at this World Heritage Site, and a group of about 20 cultural first aiders have arrived on the scene to assess the damage to that cultural heritage. They had to first negotiate with the military and make sure that they could have access to the site, and once they entered the site, unfortunately another bomb just went off.
They will be given 3 hours, and in those 3 hours they have to negotiate access to the site with the military. There are injured people on the site. Those people will be evacuated, and our participants will have to work around all this confusion, working with these external actors to safeguard cultural heritage.
The key actors include the military, because if you get something like a security incident or a bombing where there have been deaths and there's a critical possibility of it being repeated, they are there. That's your first point of access, will be the military. Then you also have the Red Cross or Red Crescent. You have the medical and emergency services of the given country. But it's the military that they have to talk to first. And by doing so, they have to make themselves accessible. The military's job is security. It's not really heritage.
They had to negotiate with us because they wanted to reach the area where the cultural heritage was, and so they had to negotiate if they can go at the place, if the place is secure, and if there will be army who protect them doing their job.
The aim of the negotiation exercise in this type of scenario is first and foremost to enable the first aiders to have access to a site and to be respected as people who will make the situation better rather than worse. In this case, though, we also have multiple parties, so we have conflicts and fracture lines socially while the whole situation is going on. Then they also have to negotiate personal problems, political problems, and blockages to doing the work they need to do.
They have to understand what is the context, where the emergency has taken, so that's step one. Step two, they have to understand who are the actors, who are the people who are responding on the scene, and with whom they have to communicate. And after that, they have to follow some technical procedures. For example, they will have to do an on-site survey. They will have to carry out a damage assessment, followed by rapid documentation of the scene, where is cultural heritage, how many objects are damaged, what is the extent of damage. And after that, they will have to physically retrieve the items from the wreckage of the bombing and stabilize them, dry them out, and pack them and move them off to safe storage.
Well, the scenario has always been a part of this ICCROM course, and it's a culmination of putting together current events, inspiration from other heritage conflicts, and then also setting the scene for our cultural first aiders to assess the damage in a quick manner and make good decisions regarding it.
The exercise we have just seen was part of a course organized jointly by ICCROM, the Netherlands National Commission for UNESCO, and the Smithsonian Institution. Another important tool developed by ICCROM is PATH, which is a shortening of for Peace Building Assessment Tool for Heritage Recovery and Rehabilitation. It is meant to inform the planning and implementation of actions to secure stabilization and recovery heritage whilst making these efforts more conflict sensitive. NATO stands as the leading organization in developing a military approach for applying the Hague Convention. And ICCROM has also taken part in the promotion of better implementation of the 1954 Hague Convention, its protocols, and other relevant conventions. Coordination between security forces and heritage agencies from the beginning of the conflict transformation process is essential. Developing true coordination between military and heritage institutions in an internal armed conflict is deeply challenging and complex. I would highlight 4 possible strategies for advancing cooperation in this regard. Number 1, active policy-level inter-agency dialogue to ensure coordination and information exchange at international, national, and regional levels. Number 2, even and equal partnerships between heritage sectors and security sectors to better understand each other's roles, especially during peacekeeping, peacemaking, and peace building. Number 3, joint training. Stimulating actions in the field are equally crucial. Number 4, developing guidelines on sharing information and coordination in the field of action. This conference will provide an opportunity to help advance NATO's work on this issue of crucial importance, recognizing that NATO has already started to incorporate cultural property protection into its policies and doctrines. ICCROM stands ready to engage with all partners through its programs. I thank you and wish you successful deliberations during this conference. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So as a next item on the agenda, we have a video message from the president of Ikomositaria, Mauricio Di Stefano. So please, can you project the message?
Ringrazio per l'invito formulato ad Ikomositaria di partecipare a questa importante conferenza nazionale del 2021 organizzata dalla Nato, e in particolare ringrazio il colonnello Giuseppe De Magistris per questa opportunità che ci consente di portare qualche comunicazione in questo importante settore del patrimonio culturale, dove ICOMOS, che come è noto è l'International Council on Monument and Sites, è uno dei 3 consulenti advisory body del Centro del Patrimonio Mondiale dell'UNESCO, insieme all'UCN che si occupa della parte naturalistica e dell'ICCROM della parte formativa e di ricerca applicata, e ICOMOS si occupa delle convenzioni del 1972 sul patrimonio archeologico, architettonico, ambientale e della convenzione del 2001 del archeologia subacquea e del 2003 del patrimonio immateriale, attraverso 28 comitati scientifici, di cui uno, l'ICORP, è anche ospite di questa conferenza, e che si occupa appunto di preparazione a rischio, ma ritengo che la materia sia assolutamente trasversale un po' a tutti i comitati, perché fondamentalmente il tema della salvaguardia del patrimonio mondiale in caso sia di conflitti bellici, sia nel caso di catastrofi naturali o provocate dall'uomo, imponga un approfondimento e una conoscenza che sia fortemente basata sulle azioni ex ante di preparazione. Ecco, da questo punto di vista ritengo che la Nato come struttura militare ha una forte capacità, un rigore di approccio alle tematiche che è di assoluta garanzia e essenziale ai fini di una programmazione strategica di interventi su questi beni, che sono a tutti gli effetti da considerare obiettivi sensibili, esposti molto più di altri alle 4 particolari forme di aggressione che noi rileviamo nei confronti di questo patrimonio. La prima è quella della furia iconoclasta, che abbiamo visto scoppiare fortemente nei casi, ahimè, del 2015 di Palmira, dove c'è stato anche l'assassinio del suo direttore, di Khalal al-Assad, che nel 2015, e poi gli esempi proprio, diciamo, plateali di distruzione con martellate, a più riprese di questo patrimonio, è una forma emblematica, quasi provocatoria, di aggredire l'identità di questi luoghi, sia nei confronti dei cittadini del posto, ma soprattutto dell'opinione pubblica internazionale. Ancora di più quando questi beni sono beni che appartengono alla lista del patrimonio mondiale, quindi sono essi stessi beni considerati di valore comunitario. Quindi il secondo punto è quello del valore intrinseco che ciascuno di questi beni ha come opera d'arte, come opera dell'uomo, come espressione culturale, artistica, e quindi la distruzione irreversibile di uno di questi beni è uno sfregio a questo aspetto. Il terzo è l'obiettivo di morte, provocare naturalmente fenomeni di stragi, questo particolarmente rivolto ai casi di beni molto visitati o di musei in cui c'è assembramento e c'è la possibilità di azioni che possano portare anche in luoghi paesaggisticamente importanti dove ci si reca rischi di questo tipo, e infine la parte economico-commerciale che è legata appunto al traffico illecito dei beni che vengono trafugati, rubati e messi nel commercio, producendo anche fonti finanziarie difficilmente seguibili, diciamo, se non da strutture particolarmente preparate. Quindi diciamo che il tema non può che trovare il massimo interesse da parte di ICOMOS, in particolare di Ikomositaria, essendo l'Italia il paese che in maniera riconosciuta sia per la convenzione sottoscritta nel 2004 con l'UNESCO, sia per l'esperienza e l'oggettiva consistenza del proprio patrimonio anche UNESCO, 58 siti riconosciuti, 14 immateriali, e un tessuto nel quale la ricerca scientifica, le competenze e le capacità anche di utilizzo di mezzi e macchinari tecnologici sono fortemente avanzate. Pertanto mi auguro fortemente che da questa conferenza possa nascere un piano programmatico di lavoro in cui le nostre competenze possano essere messe a disposizione degli obiettivi che la Nato si è data in questi anni e in particolare in questo settore. Ringrazio ancora tutti e auguro buon lavoro per il prosieguo di questa conferenza.
Okay, thank you very much. So our next presentation will be in person, and it will be from the president of Blue Shield International, Professor Peter Stone. So please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Could I have the next slide, please? Before I start, I'd just like to thank the organisers, in particular the Colonel, for inviting me. I'd like to thank everybody for speaking in English and everybody for letting me speak in English. The meeting is entitled, "Is there a role for NATO stability policing in cultural property protection?" And the absolutely resounding answer to that is yes, of course. And what I want to do in this presentation very briefly is talk about what is stability policing. Most of us know that. What is cultural property? Most of us know that, but let's just focus. Why is CPP important to stability policing? And talk a little bit about my organisation, the Blue Shield. Next, please. So, and we've heard this quote already today, but the italics there, what is stability policing? A set of police-related activities intended to reinforce or temporarily replace the indigenous police in order to contribute to the restoration and or upholding of public order and security, rule of law, and the protection of human rights. Put another way, it's an external, alien, intrusive, supporting or replacing the norm, and the norm is what everybody wants to get back to. So stability policing is policing done in an extraordinarily difficult set of circumstances. It is often mistrusted, resented, and not infrequently opposed. So from my perspective, cultural property protection can be a massive opportunity or a massive Achilles heel and a massive problem. Next, please. So, secondly, what is cultural property? Well, we all know cultural property provides the tangible building sites, objects, and intangible traditional clothing, stories, songs linked to the past that helps communities and provides to individuals and communities a sense of place, a sense of identity, a sense of belonging, thereby contributing overall to individual and community well-being and dignity. Critical elements. And just one aside to the image, don't let anybody tell you that cultural property is and the issues around restitution and issues of cultural property value is something that comes and goes quickly. The image, of course, is one of the Benin Bronzage, which was looted by British troops, again, over 150 years ago. And it is still frontline news across the world at the moment in terms of the restoration of these objects. So it's a very current issue, even though aspects of it happened 100 or more years ago. Next, please. These things, this cultural property, can be of international importance. We've just heard about World Heritage. National importance, perhaps a royal palace or a parliament, traditional dress. Or local importance. And local importance is often the most important for a local community, And don't forget, it's frequently the local community that stability policing is dealing with. So the two images there we have are of Daesh's destruction of the image on the left, the Temple of Baal, which is no longer recognizable as that image. But for the local community, probably far more important, and certainly in the short term, is the image on the right. The destruction forced by Daesh on the men of the community to destroy their own cemetery, and the impact on the well-being and the thought and the dignity of that local community in Tadmor by having to be forced to destroy their own religious icons, their own cemetery, was a devastating impact on that local community. So you have the three levels, but from a stability policing point of view, quite probably the local level being of critical importance. Next slide, please. And why is it important? Okay, so protection of both movable and immovable, tangible and intangible cultural property helps preserve community cohesion, the social fabric, and accelerates economic recovery, especially following conflict, thereby contributing to the establishment, and this is a phrase I'll come back to, of healthy, peaceful, secure, sustainable communities. And there you have some lads wearing traditional costume in Nepal. Next slide, please. If you allow cultural property to be damaged or destroyed on your watch as stability peacekeepers and policers, you will cause problems. People want to protect their cultural property, and they want you, that alien intrusive group, to help them protect it. We must always, a mantra of the Blue Shield, put the protection of people first, but the protection of people's cultural property is so indivisibly intertwined with the protection of those people that it comes a paper-thin difference second reason for protection. And that means protecting that cultural property indivisibly intertwined. And just in terms of thinking of well-being, the image in the slide was created as a World Heritage Site in the 1970s in Australia as a natural World Heritage Site, but of Ayers Rock. 10 years later, it was additionally inscribed as a cultural World Heritage Site of Uluru Katajuka for the indigenous Aboriginal community of Australia. And the well-being of the local indigenous community, the Anangu, had been severely damaged by that, to their mind, false inscription of a white scientific imposition onto their major cultural site. And that sort of insensitivity is exactly the sort of thing that we need to avoid in terms of instability policing. Next, please. So let me give you what I think is probably the best example of stability policing that I've ever come across. In 1917, in the First World War, depending on your point of view, when the British occupied, liberated, conquered Jerusalem, to emphasise the fact that the British military were coming in peace, Field Marshal Allenby walked into Jerusalem. And he also put out a proclamation, and included in the proclamation was the phrasing, "Every sacred building, monument, holy spot, shrine, traditional site of the three religions will be maintained and protected." And that was directly targeted at the Islamic population, who were already being wound up by agitators saying, here are the Christians, here are the Crusades again. Okay, but somebody on Allenby's staff, as yet unknown, but I'd love to do the research when I retire, was thinking more deeply. Next slide, please. because the troops that they used to protect the Islamic sites were not British regular troops, but troops of the Indian Army under Allenby's control. Perhaps we'll get this back, but here we are. It's difficult to see in this image, but the troops there are Indian troops from a Muslim regiment. So not only are they protecting, but they're protecting by showing the local community their understanding of the sensitivity of the situation. And in the local newspaper to where I live, in fact, they also, of course, get a propaganda dig into the Germans in the First World War there, contrasting this very careful stability policing with the German bombardment of a cathedral in France. Excellent cultural property protection, and as a result, there was no insurrection or dissatisfaction with the military presence in Jerusalem while that maintained. And that became a very different story when the military were replaced with the political establishment from the UK. Next, please. Let me fast forward to Iraq in 2003. Firstly, neither of the two main protagonists in the coalition, the US or the UK, had ratified the 1954 Hague Convention, which the General mentioned a few moments ago. No combat troops in the coalition had any orders to protect any cultural property in Iraq. It simply had not been part of the planning process of the invasion. It appears that these sites were not even marked on combat military maps. So when the then Director of Research, Donnie George, went to the American Army pleading for the National Museum to be protected, he was told, "Sir, there isn't a National Museum here," because it wasn't on their maps. There was extraordinarily limited expertise within the coalition forces, predominantly resting with the Italian Carabinieri, but also with civil affairs within US military. At the time of the coalition got to Baghdad, much of that expertise was still in the US because they hadn't been deployed yet, because the military success went so fast that actually the Brits developed a term of catastrophic success, because they were in a position which they anticipated to be in 6 months later, and they lost that 6 months of planning time as to what to do when they got there. As a result of that failure, next slide please, in 2006, perhaps a less good example of cultural property protection. None of the Islamic sites, none of the Christian sites, none of the Jewish sites in Iraq were protected by coalition troops. As a result, it was easy for protagonists to attack one of the holiest Shia shrines and sites in Iraq, in Samarra, and the destruction of that is generally accepted by commentators on that conflict as being the tipping point from an increasingly fed-up community wishing the coalition would go away into the full-scale civil war, sectarian-based, which forced the coalition to stay in Iraq for nearly a further 5 years, increasingly taking 5 years more of casualties and fatalities and bad PR. It was an avoidable event if only somebody in the planning system had thought about the importance of cultural property protection. Next slide, please. So just a health warning. Cultural property defines who people are, but of course who they're not. Who belongs and who does not, who is included and who is excluded. It can be, and frequently has been, used as an excuse for and a target in conflict. Former Yugoslavia and the ISIS attacks on the Yazidi. But it can and should be used as a vehicle for understanding, mutual recognition and peace building. The main term objective of that for both the uniform sector, which I'll define in a moment, the heritage sector and the humanitarian sector must surely be the attainment of healthy, peaceful, secure, sustainable communities. And for the uniformed and humanitarian sectors, CPP can provide an essential contribution, or it can be omitted and become a serious threat or even a risk. Next slide, please. So why is it important? It's important for technical reasons. It's protected under international law, a whole series of different ones, under UN Security Council resolutions, and we've already heard the importance of 2347. It frequently is part of an explicit mandate or state agreement before a stability policing operation can take place. There is the potential use by politics and politicians of cultural property, both in a positive but equally a negative way. The illicit trade, as we've heard numerous times today, can be a source of income to continue the destabilisation. It can contribute, as we've heard, in terms of the development of tourism to post-conflict stabilisation. And again, that value of cultural property in putting back economic stability. And it can be, if approached properly, soft power or a force multiplier, or perhaps not, as in 2006 and following in Iraq. Next, please. And this slide, just with thanks to Tim Purbrick, the recent and first commanding officer of the UK's recently recreated Cultural Property Protection Unit in the Army. So Tim's view of why his unit was set up and why it's important to the Army, yes, it's a legal responsibility, but much more important, the long list of opportunities. It improves mission legitimacy, increases influence, improves reputation, improves force protection and human intelligence. It improves cultural understanding, prevents threat financing, facilitates post-conflict stabilisation, reconstruction and recovery. And most of all for Tim, it was a moral obligation to those local communities. And failure can lead to alienation and undermining force credibility, thereby causing force problems. Next slide, please. So, briefly at the end, just to talk a little bit about my organisation. The Blue Shield, the emblem at the, on the slide there, of the 1954 Hague Convention, and originally termed the Blue and White Shield. And in the discussions in 54 and immediately following in 1955, especially from those members of the International Committee for the Red Cross, there was an expectation and a hope that a new organisation would be built, the Blue and White Shield, to help with the protection of cultural property, which they saw as equally important as the protection of people that they did, but they wanted a sister organisation. That took a long time to actually come to fruition. The Blue Shield was only created in 1996 on the process from 4 founding organisations, all heritage, for museums, for monuments and sites, for libraries and for archives. This is our 25th anniversary year. And there's a bit more information there, but that's enough to see. Next slide, please. Our primary context is the 54 Convention and its protocols, underpinned by a wider understanding of international law and the UN's aspirations and UNESCO's strategic agendas. We're also conscious of the Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction and the Sustainable Development Goals. And we see CPP as a multi-sector responsibility and opportunity. Next, please. So our mission is that we are committed to the protection of the world's cultural property, and we are concerned with the protection of cultural and natural heritage, tangible and intangible, in the event of armed conflict, natural or human-made disaster. So we've moved away from the precision of the 54 Convention for a number of reasons, and we can talk about that if anybody's interested. And there you see one of our 30 now national committees, the Argentinian National Committee, in the process of filming a 6-part television series about Blue Shield and cultural property protection. Next slide, please. But we, as Blue Shield, need partners. We can't do CPP alone. As I say, it's a multi-sector responsibility. And we need the uniformed services, so not only the armed forces, but police, customs, emergency services there. We need the humanitarian sector to go back to the aspirations of the mid-50s and actually help build and take on board within the humanitarian sector the importance of cultural property protection. We also need to educate the heritage sector that people in uniform don't all actually have horns and long tails and other devil incarnate, but they are people who have the same aspirations, albeit starting perhaps from a different starting point to a heritage one. We also have to educate the heritage sector not to engage in practice that can help the damage of cultural property, like museums buying objects that they shouldn't be buying. And we have developed over the last 5 years a number of formal partnerships with the ICRC, with J9 section at Nato, with the UN peacekeeping deployment in Lebanon, and in process with UNESCO. Next, please. And we envisage Blue Shield as this triangle, and with the 3 points of the triangle being those 3 sectors, all starting from a different point, but all ending with that aspiration, I believe, of healthy, peaceful, stable, sustainable communities, because that's what all 3 of those sectors want to deliver. And as put by a US military colleague a few months ago, what the Blue Shield is actually that safe space where those 3 communities, sectors can come together and talk in a way that can contribute to the 3 sectors contributing to the creation of those communities. But we aren't fooled that we live in that lovely triangle of people working towards the same degree. We are within a broader context of politics, which can be both good and less good, of the legal responsibilities of media, and in particular the use of social media, but all underpinned at the bottom by that need for communities and those 4 aspects. Next, please. So we divide up our work into 6 areas, and I'm not going to read them all out there, but we ask all of our national committees and Blue Shield International, the central element of the organisation, to plan and report every year on these 6 areas, but they can prioritise those 6 areas in any which way they want to. And so the UK priorities for the National Committee may be totally different to the Argentinian or the Australian or whichever other entity. Next, please. We've identified 8 threats to cultural property during conflict or following a disaster. And again, I'm not going to go through those. They're detailed on our website, and there's a lot more information about them there. But you see me there talking on an exercise where there were 7 countries present in the exercise, but the first formal training programme for the UK's new CPP unit. And in fact, Roger, the new unit commander, in the foreground there on that training process. Next slide, please. So finally, just a couple of elements of what we do at the moment. We're building the capacity of our national committees. We have 30 at the moment. We've got another 10 in some level of preparation. We've got a project led by Blue Shield Germany to help develop African national committees of the Blue Shield. We're working with NATO on a template for the information that should go into identifying cultural property that shouldn't be targeted, if at all possible, during armed conflict. And that's been going on for now a number of years, trying to get that template usable for the increasingly high precision of targeting and targeteers needed there. And what we would normally use in the heritage sector is simply not precise enough for what military targeteers need. So that conversation and dialogue is going on. This autumn we're working with 3 NATO exercises, putting in cultural property problems injects into those exercises. We're developing generic training material for UN peacekeepers, and next February we're running for the first time an international peacekeeping week-long course at the UN Peacekeeping School in Ireland. We're developing relations with the humanitarian sector, as I said. And just 2 brief examples right at the end. Following the 4th of August explosion at the port in Beirut last year, I was on the phone to colleagues in Beirut within 4 hours of the explosion. That happened on a Tuesday. By the Sunday, Blue Shield in Lebanon and working in conjunction with an NGO, Biladi, in Lebanon, had got a pictorial report on the damage to museums, libraries, religious sites and others. That pictorial report enabled us to work as a threesome, 2 Lebanese organisations, Blue Shield International, with 4 different international heritage funding agencies to get us immediate funding for the securing of museums, libraries, archives that were not the direct responsibility of the DGA in Beirut. But we had been working with UNIFIL and the Lebanese Armed Forces since 2013, and the most important thing that happened, to my mind, was as soon as UNIFIL were given permission by the UN to move out of their normal area of operation in the south of the country and come to help initially at the port, UNIFIL phoned up the Blue Shield and said, guys, is there something that we can do to help while we're in Beirut? And so we got another triangle of partnership which had been built up over the previous 7 years. And it was only because we'd been working with UNIFIL and LAF for 7 years that that partnership and that trust had been developed for UNIFIL to make that phone call. And as a result, we were able to clear a number of roads in Beirut from the damage, but most importantly, to protect and secure and stabilise a number of buildings there. The most important being the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, which had lost 3/4 of its roof. And the issue with if you lose 3/4 of a roof is usually the walls of the building go out and the building collapses. The walls of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs were moving out at a speed of 20 centimetres a week. And it was only because we got LAF and UNIFIL working with us there that they were able to pull those walls back in with their engineering expertise and put on a temporary roof. Now, it will be probably 5-10 years before that building is usable again, but that immediate safeguarding and securing of the building, the roof going back on top, enables the Lebanese to take responsibility for that and find the funding from international donors to restore the building as they wish. Had that not taken place, had UNIFIL not made that phone call, that building would now be rubble. So, key elements there. Afghanistan, we are working closely with trying to get some of the collections out of the country still, and also, as a first priority, as I said right at the beginning, always people first, trying to get some of the cultural heritage experts out of the country. And believe me, I hesitate now opening my email in the morning because we get some extraordinarily harrowing pleas for help from colleagues who are now on their third, fourth secret hiding place as they are being hunted down, and they are desperate to get out of the country. And we're trying to do our best. We have got a number of people out, but there are still many more to get out. So that's the work of the Blue Shield, and I would offer, very finally, what could we do for NATO stability policing? Well, the first thing that NATO need is the CPP doctrine, which NATO identified in an internal report as a need back in 2012. So we need that doctrine policy. We need member states of NATO to introduce CPP into the education and training of their national armed forces and police forces. We need all member states to ratify and, crucially, implement all three parts of the Hague Convention, the 1970 Convention, and the 2003 Intangible Heritage Convention. And then finally, we need, great, we'll get a policy, I hope sooner rather than later, but what are the implications of that policy for the rules of engagement, not only of those in terms of an armed conflict, but in terms of stability policing? And just as one example of that, I leave you with, as far as I'm aware, there has only been one example in recent history, and I say that from, let's say, the end of the Second World War, I think probably in the 20th century, where lethal force has been part of the rules of engagement to protect cultural property. Only once. It didn't get that far, but there was only one time. Is that something that may have to change if cultural property protection becomes the norm, or is that something we step back from? I'm not giving a view on that at all, but it's a question that those in uniform will need to address before they are put into a very difficult position, as the UN peacekeepers were in Mali when CPP was put into the Mali mandate, but nobody really knew what that meant and what the implications for CPP being in that mandate were, which is why it came out of the mandate back 5 years ago now. I don't want that ever to happen again. I want CPP to be firmly in every deployed mandate. I want it to be in every stability policing mandate, but we actually have to work out what the implications of that are. And just to finally echo the General, CPP, if we are going to do it properly, is actually a request, an aspiration for changing the way that war is fought. And that's what Blue Shield is about. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Professor. It was a very informative presentation, and to be honest, it gave us a lot of food for thought. Now, because we are a little bit tight with time, I would like you to keep the questions for later, because we will have time again for later, and tomorrow we will have time to meet again. In the meantime, Professor, there's a reward for you for your very, very interesting presentation.
So then the stamp, everybody will receive one copy, even Gonzalo, I didn't have it early today, so you will receive it, you will have it the final day. If you receive eat twice, please give one back. Because it's cultural property. And then the crystal cube of the center. So for your desk.
Thank you very much.
And then when I come to England, I will double check whether it is on your desk.
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There were a lot of quotes today, a lot of quotes for General Eisenhower. I would like to quote Prussian Field Marshal von Moltke, who said that no battle plan survives contact with the enemy. And today our battle plan failed when we went to eat because the food was so good. We were a little bit delayed. So I took the initiative together after consultation with the chairman to change the agenda a little bit around. Since we have a VTC, somebody who's going to intervene in VTC, our colleague Luigi Mancuso from Europol, and since he's been waiting online for about an hour, so I would like to give him the floor now so he can talk to us about what Europol is doing in the field of cultural property protection. We can then have a very short coffee break, 10 minutes, but this time I will personally make sure we start at the 10th minute, and then we can continue with the business as planned, hopefully. So, is Luigi Mancuso online at the moment?
Yes, I am.
Yes, well, ciao Luigi, greetings from Vicenza, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, and thanks for inviting Europol at this workshop. My name is Luigi Mancuso. I'm a Lieutenant Colonel of Carabinieri, and currently I'm seconded at Europol Property Crime Unit, where I am responsible for supporting investigation in the field of cultural goods crime. I have prepared a presentation for this workshop, if it's possible to have this presentation. Sorry, I don't see the presentation. Okay. Okay, perfect. Okay, thanks. Next slide, please. Okay, in this presentation, I'm going to give you an overview of this criminal phenomenon from the Europol perspective. I mean, from based on the information received by Europol from member states. Then I'm going to talk about the Europol support, and finally, I will present some challenges for the future. Next slide, please. Sorry, I don't see the presentation, sorry. Okay, perfect. Okay, cultural goods crime is a complex criminal phenomenon, including different crimes, mainly art theft, archaeological looting, and art forgery. Europol receive a lot of contribution from member states that are mainly focused on art theft and archaeological looting. That's why I will focus on these two criminal phenomena in the next slide. Please, next slide. Archaeological looting is a complex phenomenon that is handled by complex criminal networks that are able to move archaeological goods from the origin countries to the destination countries. These transnational networks are structured in a horizontal way. I mean, they are not hierarchical structured, so they are not like mafia-type organizations, but they are more similar to fluid networks where individuals and groups join a common criminal project. It doesn't mean that they are less effective than hierarchical structured organization. This is only to say that they have a different structure to manage this trafficking. As regards the objects that are trafficked, usually these objects are small objects that are easy to be smuggled and that are easy to be transported and to be provided with fake origin documents. So these objects usually are not masterpieces. Of course, there are exceptions, but usually they are not masterpieces. So the profits are made on the quantity of objects smuggled. So the objects are similar to the one that you can see in the picture. These objects are easy to smuggle and easy to be covered with a fake document of origin, as I said before. This is important because the aim of this trafficking is to infiltrate the legal art market. This is a very important point because there's a big difference with other illegal trafficking, like for example drugs. Drugs is everywhere an illegal commodity. On the other hand, looted archaeological goods must at a certain point enter the legal art market in order to maximize the profit. How this is possible? This is possible because they are provided with fake certificate of provenience, and considering that these goods have never been recorded anywhere, once they are provided with a fake certificate of provenience, any audit about their legitimacy is almost impossible. Last point, we noticed from the investigation that we are supporting the use of technology. More and more looted archaeological goods are sold online using different platforms that allow traffickers to be more safe when selling these objects. Next slide, please. This chart shows the roots of trafficking, and it is based on the investigation that Europol is supporting. As you can see, there is a huge trafficking of archaeological goods coming from countries located in North Africa and Middle East. These are considered origin countries for looted archaeological goods. And destination countries are usually Western countries with large antiquities market. For example, Germany, France, the Netherlands, Belgium. As regards Europe, there are also in the European Union some origin countries, especially in the south of Europe, like Italy, Bulgaria, Greece. In some cases, these countries can be both origin and transit country. For example, Bulgaria is both an origin country because it's rich in archaeological heritage, and at the same time is a transit country for goods coming from Middle East countries. Next slide, please. Theft is another criminal phenomenon that we deal with at Europol. Theft is a completely different phenomenon, targeting a museum, art galleries, churches. In this case, it's not like for archaeological goods. In this case, goods that are targeted are high, medium value works of art. In some cases, masterpieces are targeted. Another difference with the previous criminal phenomenon is that in this case it's not possible to infiltrate the legal art market, so the destination of these goods is the black market. That can be the traditional face-to-face market, but more and more is a virtual art market, meaning that sales are performed online in using safe channels. And the last point is also quite interesting. What we have noticed supporting investigation in this field is the polycriminal groups are involved in art theft. That is interesting because this is something that is contrary to a general belief, the stereotype of the gentleman art thief. This is a myth because this kind of thief doesn't exist. On the contrary, we have noticed that polycriminal groups, groups that are involved in drugs trafficking and other kind of crime, are also interested in art theft. Next slide, please. What are the main issues, the main problems from an investigative point of view? First of all, the lack of expertise. Not all countries have specialized units. This kind of investigation, this kind of field is very peculiar also for law enforcement officers. So there is a lack of expertise for investigating this kind of crime. Another issue is the lack of technical tools, because not all countries have a dedicated national database for stolen goods. Some important tools like web crawler are not so common, so there is also lack of technical tools. And the third point is a lack of international cooperation. I must say that recently we noticed at Europol that at European level this cooperation has increased. We receive more and more contribution from the member states in order to support cases in the field of cultural goods crime. So it's going well, it's improving this cooperation at European level, but there is still a lack of cooperation with the origin countries that are usually located outside the European Union, and that is an important point that needs to be addressed. Next slide. Next, please. Sorry, the slide before. What is the support that Europol can provide to the member states in fighting cultural goods crime? First of all, let me illustrate very quickly what is Europol. Europol is the European Union Agency for Law Enforcement Cooperation. It employs more than 1,000 staff plus 220 Europol liaison officers from the member states. And just to give you an idea of our workflow, we support every year more than 40,000 international investigations. Europol mandate cover a wide range of crime areas, from drug trafficking to terrorism, cybercrime, and so on. Cultural goods crime is one of the crime areas that is included in the Europol's mandate. Next. What is in detail the support that can be provided by Europol to the member states? First of all, Europol can facilitate the information exchange, and this is a key issue because this is really important for the member states because we are speaking of a transnational form of crime. So trafficking of cultural goods is not a domestic issue, it's a transnational issue. So the possibility to exchange information in a safe way is really crucial. And from this point of view, Europol offers a network that is called the Siena, and this network allows member states to exchange operational data, data related to investigation, to ongoing investigation. This channel is safe, is quick, and it helps member states in carrying out investigations. In addition, we also can organize operational meetings. This is another typical tool offered by Europol. We organize hundreds of operational meetings every year in order to facilitate the exchange of information between investigators all over Europe, to create a network of investigators and to work together on common investigations. Another important tool offered by Europol is the analytical support. I mean that information provided to Europol are cross-checked in our database. That is to say that we help member states in handling a huge amount of data. As you know, dealing with investigation nowadays means to deal with a huge amount of data, so we help member states to deal with this issue. And another important aspect, by cross-checking data provided to Europol, we can also identify links with other investigations, with other ongoing investigations, or with other crime area. And that's another important tool, because in this way, for example, we can identify links between cultural goods crime and money laundering, for example, or other kind of crime. Another kind of support provided by Europol is the operational support. For example, when member states need to execute action day, I mean big operation, when they need to execute arrests or house searches in several countries simultaneously, we can, in this case, we can create operational center for coordinating this operation, but we can also deploy Europol staff on the spot with tools to extract data, to check the Europol database on the spot. So we provide this kind of support for big operation that require a complex organization. And finally, we also offer a strategic analysis. I mean, based on the information that we receive, we provide a strategic assessment of the specific crime areas and also in general terms. Probably the most known product from Europol in this field is the SWOT, the Serious and Organized Threat Assessment. That is an overview of the threats to the security of the European Union that Europol produces every 4 years, and it includes all the crime area, so also include also the cultural goods crime. Next, please. In this slide, I just want to show you some operation supported by Europol, and just to give you an idea of the numbers that we are dealing with in case of trafficking of cultural goods. Operation Demetra was an operation, was a 4 years operation involving Italy, UK, Germany and Spain, resulted in the arrest of 23 persons and the seizure of more than 25,000 archaeological goods. Then we supported Operation Brooks, 3 years investigation triggered by a theft in a warehouse of London, where 260 rare books, millions of euro worth, were stolen. Also in this case, the operation resulted in the arrest of all criminals involved. Operation Medicus is another example. It's a 2 years investigation carried out by Bulgaria, Germany and UK. Again, is a trafficking of archaeological goods and resulted in the arrest of 80 persons and 4,600 archaeological goods. Another example is Operation K, 2 years investigation involving Italy, France, UK, Germany and the Republic of Serbia. This common investigation led to the arrest of 23 persons and the recovery of 10,000 archaeological goods. So we are speaking of a high number of cultural goods recovered, and I think that this can give an idea of the numbers, of the figures in this field. Next, please. Speaking of operation, I would like also to mention Operation Pandora. Operation Pandora is an annual operation developed within the framework of Impact, that is the European platform for fighting organized crime. This operation is led by Spain. Co-leaders are Italy, Netherlands, Cyprus, Europol, Interpol and WCO. As you can see, this is not only a European operation, because these operations try to merge different kind of professional background and also countries that are outside the European Union in the perspective of maximize the impact in this field. So usually this operation involve around 30 countries, but in some cases we have also reached more than 100 countries participating in this action. It's interesting because Operation Pandora adopts a multi-perspective approach. So there are different police activities that are jointly performed during a period of time. These activities includes check at the border, crossing points, ports, auction houses, museum, residential properties, as well as activity like online investigation. As I said before, this is more and more a means of distribution of looted, stolen archaeological goods. So an important activity within Operation Pandora is the cyber patrol, where we bring together police officers and custom officers for different countries in order to work together to selected targets. Next, please. Again, I just want to show you the figures just to give you an idea of the numbers of the black market related to the trafficking of cultural goods. These figures shows the trend of Operation Pandora during the year. So as you can see, we started in 2016 with 3,600 cultural goods seized, and last year in 2020 we reached an excellent results with the recovering of more than 56,000 cultural goods stolen or looted in all the participating countries. This was an impressive result, and from my point of view it's interesting because it shows the number, how huge is the black market, because this is an interesting aspect. It's not easy to understand how huge is this market. This is a long-standing issue, how to measure the black market. Of course, investigation can give an idea of this black market. Next, please. So this is my last slide. I would like to present some challenges for the future that are based on the experience done by Europol in this field. We see as challenge the increasing of law enforcement expertise, the developing of innovative tools that must be shared. That's another important aspect. It's important that we all have the same innovative tools. Another aspect is the cooperation. What is important is to increase the exchange of information by Siena, I mean at European level, but at the same time is important to enhance the cooperation with non-European countries, non-EU countries, that can be also destination countries for looted, stolen cultural goods. As regards crime areas, an important challenge is to detect links with terrorism and money laundering. This is again a long-standing issue because especially in the past, investigation in the field of cultural goods crime were mainly focused on the recovering of goods. That, of course, is an important issue and is still considered important. But the perspective has changed a little bit because we are now focused also on detecting links with other crime areas, terrorism, money laundering, as well as polycriminal groups. Because as I said before, this is not only a crime performed by specialized organizations. There are organized crime, I mean traditional organized crime that is also involved in cultural goods crime, and it's important to understand why and to understand how these profits are made, how are used. So this is an important challenge. Finally, from an operational point of view, what is important is to identify the high-value targets, meaning the most dangerous criminals involved in this field, and to establish operational task force at European level, but also involving non-EU countries. Well, this was my last slide. Thank you very much again for inviting us and for the attention. And of course, if there are questions, I'll be glad to answer.
Thank you very much, Luigi. So we're a little bit tight with the time, so I would skip the question, but we will address you. We will contact you if we get questions in the upcoming days. So thank you, Luigi, for this. What I would like to do now, as I said, no battle plan survives contact with the enemy. So let's stop for 10 minutes for a quick coffee. And then after we return from the coffee break, I will give the floor to Silvio Mele, to Lieutenant Colonel Silvio Mele, who will give us a presentation from his point of view, European Union Advisory Mission in Iraq. So 10 minutes, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, please take a seat. Ma infatti di solito c'è la campanella.
Ma sotto là c'è domani, perché tutti questi posti?
Infatti io me li sono trovati qua i post-it, comunque è un omaggio di Bob. Aspetta, dopo. Grazie, penso fosse una battuta del direttore, non penso sia sul serio. Ok. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you. As I mentioned during the coffee break, it's been more and more challenging to get people back for the coffee breaks. So I will promise we're almost done. But I think it's very interesting, and I think also the coffee breaks present opportunities for networking. And I think this is also one of the purposes of these events, to meet each other in person. Anyway, it is with great pleasure, as I announced before our coffee break, that I will give the floor to Lieutenant Colonel Silvio Mele. Not only is he a great friend of mine, we are schoolmates, so it's a double pleasure for me to give him the floor. Silvio, the floor is yours.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And it's a little bit awkward to stay here because I'm not only a schoolmate of David Elero, but I was also Colonello, the Magistris was my commander, a former commander, so that's why it's embarrassing to stay here right now in front of them. But anyway, I'm Silvio Mele, Senior Strategic Advisor on Organized Crime within the European Mission Advisory Mission in Iraq. But I'm representing the mission, so I need to have more official speech. I prepared a presentation no more than 10 minutes long, so it will not lasting too much, I think, but I will be very glad to answer your question at the end. Excellencies, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of General Christoph Buick, head of EUAM Iraq, along with Professor Paolo Foradori, that is among us mission political advisor, I express my warmest thanks for inviting us to this important event, focused on the role of protection of cultural heritage in stability policing. The European Union mission, advisory mission in Iraq, was launched in October 2017. It's quite new mission, in response to a request, an official request from Iraqi government to provide advice and expertise at the strategic level in civilian security sector reform. Moreover, the mission aims to analyze, assess, and identify opportunities at the national and regional level, as well as inform and facilitate planning and implementation by the member states. Within this broad mandate, one of our focus areas is enhancing the civilian security authorities' ability to protect the country's heritage. As I'm sure we all agree, the link between cultural protection and security is vital. Safeguarding the cultural goods and property is not simply a matter of cultural urgency. It is political and security priority that should translate into central component of conflict resolution and peace-building efforts, including the field of security sector reform. As we can see here, the European Union Council highlighted in 2021 that protecting and enhancing cultural heritage in conflict and crisis is essential for any strategy of peace, security resilience, and social reconciliation. To that end, UM is strengthening its activity in this area, supporting Iraqi authorities with the specific advice in cultural heritage protection. I am proud to note that Iraq is the first and only European mission with a full-time expert in this sector. The valuable contribution of the protection of cultural heritage in fulfilling the mission mandate in SSR cannot be underestimated. Cultural heritage protection directly links with critical areas such as countering organized crime, violent extremism, and terrorism. Allow me now to elaborate the nexus between the cultural heritage and counter-terrorism briefly. As we all know, Daesh iconoclasm was not random and irrational vandalism. It was, at the opposite, part of a complex and sophisticated strategy to affirm its radical ideology and assert its absolute domination over the population under its control, including the social and cultural context in which the population lived. Moreover, looting and pillaging was also a way for Daesh to finance its malicious activities. It is challenging nowadays to quantify the value of Daesh cultural looting, but still, according to some estimates, the group raised up $100 million a year, a source of financing that was second only to its revenues from oil. With that in mind, by advising Iraqi authorities on cultural heritage protection, UM is contributing to countering terrorism in 4 fundamental ways. First of all, the protection of cultural heritage is key in countering radicalization. The thousands of years shared of cultural history that Iraq is home to is an essential cornerstone in promoting cultural pluralism and diversity against obscurantism and violent extremism. Second, by providing strategic advice to the relevant Iraqi ministries and national authorities, UM helps the enforcement of the International Protection Regulation and, particularly, the implementation of the 1954 Hague Convention for the Protection of Cultural Property in the event of armed conflict. Third, the protection of cultural heritage cuts off the funding generated by looting and trafficking of artifacts, which fuels and prolongs, again, conflicts by providing critical revenue for terrorists. Fourth, at the end of the hostilities, The protection of cultural heritage can help ensure quicker recovery and stabilization by promoting societal and economic regeneration. Indeed, the rehabilitation of cultural heritage can play a decisive role in rebuilding society's fabric and creating the foundation for long-lasting peace and security, contributing to post-conflict income generation and economic security from a return to tourism and related activities. I will now highlight the mission's engagement in protecting cultural heritage. UM is currently carrying out 4 different courses of actions. The first is a publicity campaign that raises up awareness among youngsters and police officers about the importance of cultural heritage protection, promoting a friendly image of servicing-oriented police in community police cooperation. We need to work on this field. Police cannot be only a law enforcement agency, but need to be promoting the linkage with the community. This project is implemented in partnership in terms of local ownership with the Ministry of Interior along with the Ministry of Culture. Without a local agreement, no one project can be implemented. This is a key and fundamental role in our mission. The second activity involves the Ministry of Education, because I am police officer, as many of us, but I am perfectly and deeply convinced that contrast of organized crime and protection of cultural heritage need to pass through education. Involved not only the Minister of Education and several ILAC universities. The goal here is to create a think tank of law professors and legal experts to help the review of the Iraqi law 55/2002 related to the protection of cultural heritage and make it more effective. Let me just add some words about this topic. The protection, the legal framework, the protection of cultural heritage in Iraq was implemented and enacted during the Saddam regime, and is punished with the death penalty for those who are caught in smuggling archaeological artifacts. And it is very awkward for a police officer or for a European mission to support a legal framework that provides death penalty for those who are caught in committing this kind of crime. So before implementing the protection of cultural heritage, a fundamental step is supporting the review of the fundamental law. And this is another topic. As you already know, Iraq is a federal republic. In the northern part of Iraq, the Kurdistan regional government already implemented and approved, not implemented, already approved their own legal framework. And luckily, the president of the regional government haven't signed already the law, because when it comes the time that he will sign this law, there will be a deep difference of culture concerning the protection of cultural heritage between the northern part and the southern part. The law needs to be national, not regional. Thirdly, while mainstreaming the protection of cultural heritage in every mission's activity as a fundamental cross-cutting issue, we are also engaging with local communities and civil society organizations towards the common objective of preserving Iraq's tangible and intangible cultural goods and properties. Let me again add some words on this topic. Iraq is twice wide as Italy, and it has 15,000 archaeological sites already surveyed. But it is assessed that more than 50,000 archaeological sites are still to be found. And openly speaking, when the director of the State Board of Antiquities and Heritage said, sir, we need to protect more directly the archaeological site, he said, my dear friend, I would need an army to protect this huge amount of archaeological sites, and maybe an army will not enough. That's why we were talking about the fundamental role of local communities in the direct protection of archaeological sites. Protection, the direct, safe and secure of the archaeological sites cannot not only be involved or implemented by officials. A necessary involvement of local communities is critical. Last but not least, the fourth activity is creating a national IT system that helps Iraqi national capabilities to investigate cultural-related crimes, hinder international illicit trafficking, disrupt one of the most profitable funding sources for criminal or terrorist organization, and eventually recover the stolen goods. Let me conclude by highlighting the importance of this ambition project, as it is unique in the region and will give Iraq the chance to play a crucial role in the global efforts to protect cultural heritage in Iraq and the broader Middle East. It's not only a matter of building up a database of stolen work of art. It's a matter of giving the international community a hub to share all possible information. Because when we are talking about database of stolen work of art, we need information. Otherwise, a database is totally useless. And unfortunately, there's no information available from the Iraqi authorities. Because the 85% of the heritage that has been looted and is coming from archaeological sites, and so no information available for these kind of items. But the international community has. A lot of experts. When I see this presentation concerning Europol doesn't have technical tools or doesn't have experience, it's feel me bad and sad, because we have information in the international community. We have experts and scholars and archaeologists. The international community really knows where archaeological items are on the market. So the point is, how can we take advantage of all these pieces of information? And once we have this information, is there a hub? Is there a technical tool where to put on all this information? And unfortunately, not all the academics, not all the archaeologists and experts are willing to share information with the police. Unfortunately, in order to implement this database, we have a kind of market survey in the international community asking all these universities in US, Chicago, Durham University, EUAM-I project. I was asking to Peter Stone just yesterday, how can we take advantage of this information in order to feed up our database? Because we have a lot of information. Maybe it's not coming from the Iraqi national authorities, but we already have. The point is, try to find a way to store and analyze all this information. Finally, allow me to warmly thank all those who are involved in this endeavor, and again, thanks to all of you for organizing this conference. This is conclude my brief. It's very simple and straight, but I will be very glad to answer your questions or your contribution or inputs if there are any. Thank you all.
Thank you, Silvio. We can clearly see who was partying when he was at school and who was studying when he was at school. I was the partying guy. Any questions for Silvio? Yeah, first of all, the questions. Please, floor to you.
Thank you for your presentation. I think that if you go back to the slides, the last slides that you had, and something very important that you say when international community like archaeologists, scholars, they do not feel comfortable in sharing information. And I think that to all those slides, and it should probably to those course of action, one very important course of action in a conflict area is actually to re-establish credibility of the police services, because I think that one of the reasons why also international do not share information is because of the collusion of local law enforcement agency with the criminal activity. And because in many places, like there was also, I'm not sure about Iraq, but like Libya, the cultural sites were protected by the police, and at one point the police were actually, because of under threat or because of money, they were forced to sell property, I mean archaeological pieces to the Daesh that were actually occupying Sabrata, for instance. So I think that all those are excellent action, but even like for the action that you might use to, you know, fight or to counter terrorism, like credibility and the development of the police service in favor of the community is really instrumental to change the attitude and the approach in relation to information sharing.
Yes. Thank you so much for highlighting this point. That's why at the beginning of this, when I was talking about a publicity campaign, there is a specific part where the police officer is part of this publicity campaign. So, of course, a very important topic in this process is gathering trust or having trust. And unfortunately, it will be very challenging, because I can share my personal experience. I was in 2019 engaged as many other Carabinieri officers in training, although training is not a very good word, in raising awareness on police officers of the importance of cultural heritage. And when it came the time to let them understand how huge is the business, there was a part of saying that, can you see, just a little limestone, a frog in limestone, no bigger than my thumb, can be sold on the on the European market for more than 60 or 80 pounds. And then the attention was raised, not only because of the business, but the possible income that the police could gather dealing with this item. It's very important. And on the 26th of September, we had a very big workshop. And on the left side of the room, there were representatives from the Ministry of Culture. And the right side of the room, there was representatives from the Ministry of Interior. And it was not a workshop, it was a riot and riots, because at the end they fought one each other. The Minister of Interior was asking for information, and the Minister of Culture said, I'm sorry, if I don't have your the information you need, but if I did, I will not share with you. That was openly said. So if we are talking about a database, national database, that can take advantage from the Minister of Culture, this project will definitely not be implemented. And that's why we just shift the project in order to involve the international community to share their information. For example, the Chicago University or Oriental Institute, they have a database, and they publish the database, and the name is The Lost Treasures. So it's implied that they already have a database of items that could be possibly coming from, or probably come from Iraq. So why can't we not take advantage of these items in order to put this information in the database? I really know we are working not to raising awareness on the local police, but all this information that the IT system will be handled only by 15 selected police officers. But once again, you're totally right. Corruption is a very big problem in Iraq, as well as many other countries, I would say, but in Iraq is one of them for this.
Okay, thank you very much. Silvio, I think you've earned your tokens of appreciation, which will be handed to you by Colonel de Magistris.
You come from the other side.
Now you can sell them in Iraq, and you can say they are really precious Roman artifacts. So
I will
60 euros for
I
one.
will give it.
points for you. The serigraphy, and something, no, it's closed, but I mean, and then there's the crystal cube for your desk. So, grazie.
The one that you used to throw me.
No, it was a baseball ball. So, bravissimo. Grande, sei stato spettacolare.
So let's continue. As I mentioned, we're a little bit short in time. We will change a little bit the agenda. So the presentation, which was supposed to be delivered by Chief Warrant Officer Stefano Bergonzini, will move to tomorrow morning. So ideally, the last presentation for today will be the presentation from analyst Andrew Eden, who was supposed to give us a brief here on how to perform the SWOT analysis in the upcoming days. Unfortunately, he couldn't come for health-related reasons, but he will deliver his presentation in video mode. So what this leaves us with two recorded messages and a presentation in person. So I will start, if you can please, for the control room, project a presentation from the Institute for International Humanitarian Law by Colonel Mark Dakers.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Colonel Mark Dakers, and I'm the Director of the Military Department at the International Institute of Humanitarian Law in San Remo. I've been asked to say a few words at the start of this NATO Stability Policing in Cultural Property Protection conference because, unfortunately, I'm unable to be with you in Vicenza today. The International Institute of Humanitarian Law, for those of you that don't know it, is established in San Remo and has been since 1970. Its aim, its mission, is the dissemination through training of international humanitarian law in terms of both the law of armed conflict and migration and refugee law. My department, the military department, concentrates obviously on the law of armed conflict. And the dissemination of international humanitarian law is a critical task for the militaries of the world, but also for the Institute in assisting those. The Institute is a NATO PTEC and has extensive interaction with NATO and indeed with the Centre of Excellence for Stability Policing, hence the invitation for me to speak to you today. One of the points that I've been asked to touch upon is the importance of cultural property protection in international humanitarian law. Now, international humanitarian law is all about the protection of civilians, civilian objects, but most importantly, the distinction between those objects and military objectives and military personnel. It is about ensuring that in armed conflict, those that are not a part of that conflict are protected, and those objects that are not a part of that conflict are protected. And in 1954, the Hague Convention on Cultural Property Protection was concluded, which set out added protection for cultural property. Cultural property is not a military object and therefore should never be targeted in any event. But additional protection is given by the 1954 Convention. That protection, I believe, is critical, particularly when we see an increase in what might be called wars of identity or wars of ideology, where the destruction, the deliberate destruction of cultural property has become a very increasing and prevalent concept. It is an aim sometimes of those who are conducting armed conflict to destroy identity through cultural property. So the protection of cultural property is an absolutely critical concept from my perspective within IHL and the broader legal framework. Cultural property protection requires adherence to the Convention, and it requires an understanding of the Convention. The Convention, really, the critical part of it for me is Article 4, which is the commitment to protect and prohibit the prohibition of any destruction of cultural property. There is also a policing element to this, in that it ensures that if cultural property is prohibited, that has to, or cultural property is attacked, then there is a requirement to investigate and deal with the perpetrators of those crimes, because that is what they are. They are crimes. Somebody who destroys cultural property commits a war crime. It is as clear and as simple as that. The property protection in Article 4 is in times of armed conflict. There is also protection in times of non-international armed conflict, because Article 4 deals primarily with international armed conflict. So in both times of conflict, both types of conflict, there is a degree of protection. There is also a requirement to repress examples of this, and a requirement to protect property in situations of occupation. Now, for NATO stability policing, what does this mean? Well, what it means, I think, is that in certain situations where you are doing capacity building as part of a stability policing operation, then you will have a requirement to encourage and to educate and to build the capacity of the local indigenous forces, whether they be military or police or in between, to repress cultural property destruction, to search for and deal with those who have engaged in the destruction of cultural property, and to protect cultural property. An occupying power, for instance, has a duty to protect the cultural property of the occupied state or occupied territory in the same way it has a responsibility to protect its own. And this here is a key policing task. Also, there is the requirement to investigate and to try to recover cultural property. This is dealt with in some detail in the first protocol. And this again is an area where stability policing can become very important. And we have seen examples, particularly of the Carabinieri Cultural Property Protection Unit, engaging in this sort of activity to recover that property which has been stolen. So, I hope that during the rest of this conference you will get more detail on how to do this task, because that is really the key point. The requirement to do it is there, it's clearly there in the law, and that law has to be followed as all law does. But it's there, the requirement is there, the difficulty is how to do it. Now, the Institute has been looking at this over the years, and indeed one of the activities that we have come up with is the production, the publication along with UNESCO of this manual, military manual of cultural property. So that, I think, is a good starting point. If you haven't read that yet, I would advise you to do so. That is all from me. Please do enjoy your conference, and I hope to see you sometime either at the Centre of Excellence in Vicenza or perhaps even here at San Remo for some training of your own. Thank you very much, and have a good day.
Perfect. Now, for the last presentation in person of the day, I would like to give the floor to Professor Laurie Rush. So, please, Professor, the floor is yours.
Thank you so very much. It's such an honor to be invited to be a participant in today's presentations. And luckily for me, I'm here on vacation. This is Laurie's definition of a vacation. And as an independent scholar. So I can be, as Colonel de Magistris requested, mischievous, and I can be absolutely candid with you. I represent the intersection of, we've been talking about partnership all day. We've had tons of information from a huge variety of perspectives, policing, military, NGOs. And so in following with that idea of partnership, why do I view stability policing as what Colonel de Magistris mentioned as the cutting edge solution to the protection of cultural property in non-permissive environments? And I've been fortunate enough to work with the 10th Mountain Division, the most deployed division in the United States Army, and with inspired military leaders who recognize that they are very, very good at controlling the battle space and that they face tragic situations when it comes to the challenges of winning the peace. And here's where stability policing can make the magic happen. That's what I believe. And ever since learning about the concept of stability policing, I can tell you that when I'm watching the American news and I am seeing evidence of policing problems in major American cities, so here's where I can speak as an independent scholar. I turn to my husband and I say, if only we could bring the NATO stability police to this major American city and fix this community policing problem. What an extraordinary difference that could make. And I can see this concept of winning the peace in all different kinds of contexts and situations. So the challenge, and where do we build on this wide variety of information that we receive today in our explorations of the next day and a half? I suggest we look at models that have worked. And of course, my most favorite model that I have seen working now for over a decade is Carabinieri tutela patrimonio culturale. What do they bring in their model? They bring robust, basic policing skills and investigation capability. They bring sophisticated analysis of criminal behavior and patterns. This is the big advantage of something like the database in Rome, because not only do they just collect lists of missing property, along with the missing property, they collect the information about how did that property go missing. And there you begin to see the pattern, and there you also begin to see the military application. That's intelligence analysis. It helps you understand the battle space you're about to enter and who are those adversaries. Their willingness to partner, their generosity in teaching. In their video, we saw examples of their willingness to go anywhere in the world to help another force. And what is interesting for me is that I was part of a bilateral engagement in Honduras, and I went all prepared with all sorts of wonderful presentations, and one of them was on how to protect churches in rural Honduras. And I went up to start my presentation, and the representative of the diocese said, "Oh, Dr. Rush, thank you so much. The Carabinieri, they've already been here. We don't need your talk." So we see the evidence of their effectiveness and all of the important information their colleagues have learned from around the world. I do have an example of a successful model from the US. And again, how can academics support all of you? In thinking about definitions of cultural property, I can tell you that many people hate Lori Rush's definition of cultural property. My definition is a feature in the landscape where if you fail to identify it and fail to respect it, it will get a soldier or a military officer or a police officer killed. It's probably a piece of cultural property. We had an example of a stability police force who headed to New Guinea or somewhere in the Western Pacific. They were from Scandinavia, and they decided it would be a great idea to collect a crocodile, kill it, and bring it home as a trophy. Guess what? Crocodiles were sacred in this locality. They had to be evacuated by other law enforcement agencies when the indigenous people came to kill them. So as academics, what can we do right out of the gate to help you? We need to make sure that all of you that deploy have the information you need to be safe and effective out there. What are all those crocodiles waiting in the jungles of the world? And how can we help you identify them ahead of time? Another aspect of an American success story with academics is the saving of 80% of the ancient city wall of Raqqa during the retaking of the city from ISIS. How many of you knew that the coalition managed to go through those city walls, enlarge the gates, and save 80% of it plus the park of the Baghdad gate? How many of you knew? All right, one person. That extraordinary accomplishment, and the city wall of Raqqa is a key iconic piece of Raqqa identity. And we accomplished that by combining the expertise of the Smithsonian with analysis at Defense Intelligence Agency, so that the entire operations planning was designed to minimize gaps in the city wall to get the coalition forces inside. Going back to TPC, another piece of their model is the excellent legal component of their operations. So just as Colonel Alero mentioned, sometimes the big challenge is in making the case when you know who all the bad guys are and you know everything is stolen, but you don't have that legal case. And that's where good lawyers and our opportunities to work with our NATO legal advisors come into play. We all need good lawyers to help us, and we also need some anthropology, because legal systems are not the same all over the world. There's Islamic law, there's various forms of Arabic law, there's even varieties in the legal systems in the West. French law is not the same as British law, which is still not the same as American law. So it's important to also have a culturally relativistic legal capability. We've talked about the generosity at the international level. In the US, we have a saying, talk the talk, but it's much more important to walk the walk. You need to demonstrate that you believe and you are willing to act on your beliefs. Look at Tutela Patrimonial Culturale just in the last month as they intercepted antiquities from Mexico. What's the first thing the Italians did? Did they keep it and put it in an Italian museum? Absolutely not. They immediately gave it back to the ambassador from Mexico. So they're demonstrating that it's about saving everyone's cultural property, not just Italian cultural property. And finally, the emphasis on prevention and empowering individuals to protect their heritage at the local and community level. All of that teaching, all that emphasis on prevention, all of those opportunities to reach out to help even individuals inventory their personal collections. And of course, all that pays off because it contributes then to ultimate resiliency at the local level. And so when we think about the potential military and policing partnerships, and sadly, the lines between conflict and crime have blurred tremendously in our modern global world. So the military and the police need to work together. And we all share the ultimate mission of restoration of civil society. And the last lesson from TPC is think of their video. They are so good at telling us about their accomplishments. But think about all the things that have been accomplished by all the people in this room, and very few of us have any idea of those extraordinary accomplishments. And so we need to think about how do we share the message to go back again to the Colonel's discussion of creating a culture of legality worldwide. And with that, I conclude. Thank you so much.
Wow, what an inspiring speech. Thank you very much. I think this has really given me the opportunity to think of applying for the Tutela Patrimonio Culturale. So it's a shame General Riccardi left, otherwise I would have asked him to be one of these people. Thank you very much. Do you have any questions? Otherwise, I mean, yes, we have one. Please.
Thank you very much for your speech. It's really interesting. I have a question on a point that you made. Sorry, Costanza Mosley, University of Ottawa. You talk about the restitution, right? And I wonder whether you could elaborate a little bit on your views on the different ways that different countries view what it means to own cultural property. Because really this idea of ownership in Italy, it's rooted in decades of being a source country, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not a market country. But I would say, for example, in the United States, we can see it even in laws, like what happens if you want to build a house and you dig a hole in the ground. In Italy, most likely you're going to hit some, something. You're going to find something. Everything gets shut down, the Belle Arti moves in, you don't own what's in the ground. The state does, right? And I think that a lot of that then applies in this idea of restitution, right? Because it is a common patrimony. I would say, and correct me if I'm wrong, that's a very different concept in the United States, for example, right? You own the land, you own what's in the land, it's yours to keep.
Yes.
And how much does that then translate also in how we view and this idea of restitution and how difficult it is to get restitution? Thank you.
Well, the big challenge to restitution is people who are willing to buy, borrow, and steal objects that belong to other people. And that absence of moral compass when it comes to important belongings of others, whether it's at the individual, regional, national, community level. In terms of the U.S. military, I think the challenge is the Western and U.S. concept of private property. And another challenge is the cultural definition of military victory. So in the United States, our definition of military victory is declaring a boundary and saying we are the boss of this piece of land. We won it, and now we're responsible for it. And many cultures sometimes you show military victory by building an extraordinary palace filled with baths in the middle of a desert along a major trade route. Or you form a huge relief on a stone wall showing, again, on a major trade route. There's a very important relief in Iran at the intersection of miles and miles of caravans where the emperor, Darius, carved, here's what I do to my enemies. So every time you walk by that wall, you know he's the boss of not only that spot, but also where everybody came from and where everybody's going. So it becomes so challenging then to engage in all of these kinds of issues at the international level. But part of the answer, I think, is encouraging, again, that culture of legality, even if it has to be with respect to a different type of legal definition, perhaps, which didn't answer your question at all, I don't think. But restitution is tough because many people and institutions, and again, some of our most guilty museums are located in the US, and sadly in Canada too, where the keepers are like dragons with their treasure. And for me, one of the most tragic is also the failure when the objects are sacred. But again, if our long-term goal is civil society, healthy communities where people can feed their kids, hopefully our communities where an actual deity doesn't disappear from a local shrine and then enter this criminal market. So that healthy communities is also the basis of preventing the objects from disappearing in the first place. So, good question. I wish I could answer it.
Okay, thank you very much. So please, Professor.
I need to shake hands with you because I have my colleagues.
Thank you so much.
And yes, sorry. This is my card. I forgot to give you before. And this is the crystal cube. And I will double check it whether you have it because you invited me to pay a visit to you for an Ironman competition at Lake Placid. So if I manage to go there, I will pay you a visit and I will double check whether you have all of these with you.
Absolutely.
So thank you so much. My congratulations was, I was flabbergasted by your enthusiasm. So thank you so much. And I'm afraid we will stay here. And thank you for coming from the other side of the pond here for the conference.
Thank you so
I do appreciate it. I mean it. So. Quick one, my greetings to Mattia Zuzzi, Colonel from the Italian Army. He just arrived. He will be one of the moderators who was busy with other commitments. He's the commanding officer of the CIMIC, Civil and Military Interaction International Unit, which is based in Motta di Livenza, 1 hour drive from here. So, Mattia, welcome. Thank you so much for coming. Please take a seat even in front of us. Now, David?
Yes, so in line with my philosophy, I decided to make another change in the agenda. So what we will do, tomorrow, we will open the day with the presentation from Chief Warrant Officer Stefano Bergonzini, and I will also show then the ICOM presentation, which is a recorded presentation, because this will now give me the opportunity to introduce the next and last speaker of the day, Andrew Eden. He's a very experienced analyst from the Joint Warfare Center. I paid a lot of money for all the beer that I purchased, because he was supposed to be here and I was supposed to buy him the beer. He didn't come, so somebody will have to drink the beer. Sorry for that. It's a dirty job, but somebody must do it. So please, one advice, really pay attention to what Andrew is going to say, because the real added value of this event, in addition, of course, to exchanging information and to listening to what the various organizations have to offer, is the SWOT analysis, because thanks to the SWOT analysis, we will be able to come up with some really concrete points for suggestion for our, say, policymakers in NATO ACT. And Andrew has done such a great job in our past events that we decided not to change the winning team, to use an Italian expression. So, Andrew, without further ado, the floor is yours. I gave such a big introduction, now you have to deliver a fantastic presentation. Eh?
Thank you, David. No pressure there. Can you hear me okay? I'll assume that's a yes. Yep, perfect, okay. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I'm sorry I can't join you in person in lovely Vicenza. We've had a close brush with COVID-19 at home, so I had to change my travel plans at very short notice. But as they say in the air community, flexibility is the key to air power, and I hope to be able to stand in and sing for my supper tonight. But I'm also aware that I'm the only thing between you and your first glass of Prosecco this afternoon, so I'll be fairly brief. By way of introduction, as David said, I'm Andrew Eden. I'm a British NATO international civilian working at the Joint Warfare Center. And in a nutshell, we provide operational level exercises for NATO, for the Joint Force Commands, as Admiral Turan mentioned from SHAPE earlier today. So we provide those exercises, we write the scripts and provide the simulation and the stimulation. And part of that is cultural property protection, of course. So that's it's a very interesting topic from our professional point of view. And for me personally, I was an undergraduate and postgraduate archaeologist, and I still am really. So this is a topic that's very close to my heart. I'm also, or I was an officer in the British Territorial Army, so I have a sort of military background as well, hence the tie, the Royal Artillery tie there. So this is a topic that is touches me in a number of different ways. So if we could move to the next slide, please, slide number 2 of the deck that I sent earlier. I'll dig into the methodology. Perfect, thank you. If we move to slide 2. Okay, so as you'll be aware from the agenda of the event that you were sent, the aim of this whole endeavor is to assess the role of SP in the cultural property protection during NATO operations. So that's quite a specific area. So we're not talking about military police, we're not talking about strictly military activity or civilian policing activity. We're talking about Carabinieri type activities with respect to cultural property during operations. So that's quite a narrow purview. Okay, let's keep that in focus for the next sort of 36 hours as we go through those working groups tomorrow and consider the outputs and the outcomes of the conference. Slide number 3, please. Right, these are the terms of reference, and I should add to that Security Council Resolution 2347, of course, which provides a degree of legitimacy, which I think was a point made by one of the previous speakers. I think that's very important there. To explain the term by SC, which is the first 2 references, NATO's military aspect, which is an important part of NATO, but it's not the only part of NATO. The military aspect or organizations are divided into 2 pieces: Allied Command Transformation. Headquarters is in Virginia, the United States, and you heard from our first, one of our first speakers was speaking from there. And the other half is the operational side, the warfighting part, Allied Command Operations, which works out of SHAPE, and you heard from Rear Admiral Turan earlier today as well. So a by-SC document is a document, a doctrinal document that binds those 2 military aspects of NATO together. And so we have those 2 first references there. The others, you're probably far more familiar than I am with their content. And the final one, AJP, that means an Allied Joint Publication. Again, that's a doctrinal piece which provides the terms of reference, if you like, for the activity which it describes, in this case, stability policing. So if we can move to slide number 4, please. So what we hope to get out of this is to identify those key action items to improve the role of stability policing during NATO operations. And I emphasized action items there, things that we can take forward, we can get our arms around, and various stakeholders can perhaps take away and take some ownership for, some custodianship for. So that would be a really good way forward at the end of this conference. And the way we'd like to approach that is to do a SWOT analysis. And I'm pretty confident that most of you are more than well aware of what a SWOT analysis is. The SWOT standing for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. If we can move to slide number 5 now, please. So the great thing about SWOT is that it allows us to look at several different facets of an organization, or a facet, or a capability, let's say. In this case, it's the capability of NATO's stability policing. It allows us to look at the current situation, and also allows us to look into the future as well, to do some horizon scanning and to consider actions that will influence or should influence our planning and assessment. It makes us look both internally at our core qualities, our capabilities in an honest way, but also we look externally as well. So it's a sort of 360-degree review. And the key thing, of course, we have to be honest, we have to be frank, we have to be realistic, it needs to be fact-based, data-driven, and it has to be accurate. And we heard in some of the previous briefers just after the coffee break about how there are some very deep grey areas, some real problems with things like corruption and things like that, which we need to acknowledge. We won't be able to fix them necessarily, but they do need acknowledgement and consideration. Next slide, please. And in general, these are some ground rules, if you like, or best practices for brainstorming, which is, of course, what we're doing here. The assembled group there in Vicenza has got enormous experience, so I'm looking forward to getting some really good depth out of these discussions, and I wish I could be there tomorrow for those syndicate activities. Going down the checklist there, I think we've defined the problem. That was the original statement, or the aim, relating to the role of SP in CPP. And three very capable moderators who will look after you tomorrow. I would entreat them to keep the sessions very much focused on that problem. And to avoid heading down any rabbit holes. Of course, we all have our areas of experience. We have some single issue fanatics, of course, and I would urge you to maintain a sort of global view, particularly with reference to the objective at the end of this. Of course, we encourage critique, but not criticism. So I encourage you to develop ideas that others may have and explore any areas where you may see there's a great difference in your viewpoints. Use this as a great opportunity to challenge each other. Now we have the young disruptors, and in the conference that I supported a few weeks ago, they were instrumental, I would say, in helping us capture the outputs of that conference. And so I'm very pleased to see that you again have a cadre of enthusiastic and insightful individuals who will be helping you to capture that information that will be discussed tomorrow. So I see that you have some scribes in place. That's great news. And finally, to the moderators, and again, I know you're in very good hands, but keep that active chairing going, and keep everybody on time for those most important coffee breaks. Next slide, please. Moving into slide 6, just to examine strengths. What we're looking for in terms of strengths and weaknesses, we're looking internally at that capability. And now some of you, of course, are looking at that capability from the outside. So you'll be able to provide the stability police, our Carabinieri guests and so on, with a unique insight in how they are seen. And I was very interested to hear, I think this morning or early this afternoon, some of the negative perceptions of policing, and particularly foreign police forces and Carabinieri type forces in a host nation. And that's, of course, something we kind of forget when we think we're doing humanitarian support and peace enforcement and peacekeeping. So I think there's great value in the delegates that are in Vicenza this week to help identify the strengths and weaknesses, those inherent qualities from the outside. But also let's focus on some of the positive sides. We just heard in the previous speaker how the Carabinieri and other gendarme type forces can provide a very high degree of excellence and subject matter expertise. Just to explain that second bullet point as well for anyone who's confused, a force multiplier is considered to be a resource which adds disproportionate value to a mission. It can be a positive thing like Carabinieri type forces. It can also be something like, I don't know, hybrid cyber attackers or something. It's something that has a much greater effect than perhaps the resource has in its innate structure, if you like. And I think we should consider human factors, which may not be so tangible. So talent, experience, expertise, cultural understandings. For instance, the Jordanian missions in Afghanistan, for instance, are a good example of where cultural ties were leveraged to get some positive outcomes. So if we could move to slides number 8, please. Weaknesses. Again, I think there's a great opportunity to get an outside view on NATO's contributions, positive and negative. And of course, weaknesses, looking at that capability, we need to look at what are the speed bumps, if you like, or the capability or capacity challenges which may stop us from maximizing that capability from being leveraged to its greatest degree. We talked about quality, prioritization, tasks, the resourcing, of course, is always a challenge. And I think our colleague from Interpol mentioned some quite interesting topics, including credibility and so on. So really squeeze that lemon for all the juice you can get out of it, because that is going to indicate, I think, some of our action areas where we can increase our capacity and our perception. Next slide, please, slide number 9. So looking at opportunities, again, this is an area where I think we can get some real benefit out of this conference. Opportunities and threats are the external factors, and they're the factors on that horizon that I mentioned earlier. And I think this is something that we should again pay special attention to. What can we leverage on the horizon? Any new developments in legislation, capacity, and so on. Many of us may not be aware of some of those changes, so this is a great venue where we can share some inside information perhaps on things that are likely to occur in the future that we can use to our mutual benefit. And can we leverage any synergies between the stakeholders within that group? And then finally, moving on to slide 10, the threats. Again, the reverse of that, the opposite of opportunities is a threat. What are those things which in the future threaten to frustrate our endeavors in this area? Recalling the Interpol brief that we heard earlier, think about reputation and associations with other organizations. We can talk about effectiveness and capabilities, consider the workforce that we're working with, any regulation, perhaps the lack of policy top cover, and things like that. So again, that collective experience that we have in that room, I think, is going to really highlight some of those key areas that we need to address and somehow mitigate going forward. Next slide, please, slide number 11. So one of the challenges we had in having these large groups and managing these syndicates is getting the collective cerebral processes going, getting people to talk. My offering to the group is to conduct what we call an affinity categorization of ideas, thoughts, or insights. And it's a very simple process using good old Post-it notes, whereby we can share our many insights. And the technique allows us to collect a very wide array of thoughts in a way that is quite non-threatening. If people are uncomfortable, perhaps sharing verbally in a large group, we can capture those and we can discuss them in that group, but also we can take those away and think about them later. So it's in a way of capturing your experience collectively. And that's the activity that will happen tomorrow under the auspices of those moderators and syndicate leaders. So if you move to slide 12, I'll show you how this will hang together. So how we conduct this, when you're taken into your syndicate room, so I think Stefano will explain this tomorrow morning, first thing, straight after breakfast. In your syndicate groups, you'll be provided with post-it notes and pens, of course, and we ask you to, bearing in mind the aim of the conference, that focus on SPP, or sorry, SP in CPP in NATO operations, depending on whether you're looking at strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, or threats. I would like you to note on a post-it note one aspect of a strength, for instance. And I've given you an example here of stability policing, access and collaboration with Interpol. That was one I just thought of a couple of weeks ago. So if you can write on post-it notes all those things that you think are strengths for stability policing in the CPP context, what we then do is we write those down in silence. It takes about 10 minutes to squeeze all those thoughts out of your brain. And we arrange them on a table in the syndicate room. And then in silence, once everybody has put their post-it notes on the table, we ask you to rearrange them in a group, bearing in mind social distancing, into areas that you feel those ideas are grouped. For instance, it could be under policy or, I don't know, I'm trying to think off the top of my head, but as this process is conducted, as you move them into logical clusters where they're connected or even duplicated, you will start to see themes coming out. And that is the value of this activity, is that they naturally fall into clusters of themes, which can then actually be addressed as potential recommendations with action bodies. And this is the lessons learned part, which is my sort of day job back at the Joint Warfare Centre. So just to go back, we do that rearrangement of the post-it notes, and we do it in silence. And the reason we do that in silence is because if we start discussing things, we start influencing each other consciously or unconsciously. Both the person you're discussing this with, but also anybody who happens to be listening in. So it's best to do this in silence to get that sort of that consensus, if you like. And the activity is finished when the post-its have stopped moving and everybody seems pretty content that they're in logical clusters that work for you. And that's pretty much the end of the categorization. Then the moderator will probably look at those groups and try to give a sort of overarching theme to those, which you can then discuss, and perhaps, if there is time, to talk about ways to address them, to leverage them if they are strengths or opportunities, or ways to mitigate them if they are threats or weaknesses. If we could move to slide 13 now, please. So a few last ground rules, if I may. I would ask you to focus on the key elements, so that sort of broader 360-degree perception, and the current situation and the near to midterm future. If there are any friction points or areas of great disagreement or contradiction, park it after a little bit of discussion, put it in the parking lot, as they say. Let's not allow that to steer us into a rabbit hole that we don't wish to go down. But please do acknowledge it and note it, because we're capturing everything that will be discussed tomorrow. We do, of course, encourage Chatham House rules, so there are the non-attribution of any opinions that are expressed in those rooms. We found at the last event that we facilitated that there was some reservation about representation of organizations and viewpoints. So just to diffuse that and to allow people to be frank and honest and realistic, we invite Chatham House rules on the discussions. And then finally, please support the scribes in capturing the discussions. And if you could highlight things you think are really important, particularly important, then please do so and help them to capture those so we can bring those forward to Thursday when we round this up. Next slide, please, slide 14. So with that, I invite any questions, and back to the studio. David.
Thank you very much, Andrew. I knew it was a great investment to have you participate in this conference, albeit virtually. So I think this presentation was very exhaustive, and it explained to us more or less what is expected from us tomorrow. I think the key to success is to make it as informal as possible and really make it workable, you know, not coming up with strange ideas that cannot be put in practice, but you keep the feet on the ground. So what I would like to do now then, so thanks very much, Andrew. What I would like to do now, we were supposed to close with some presentations, and then we were supposed to break out in groups. But what we will do, tomorrow morning, when we will convey back here at 8:30, we will have, first of all, the recorded presentation from ICOM. Then Chief Warrant Officer Stefano Bergonzini will give us a presentation on stability policing. That's because now we heard a lot about cultural property protection, but you also need to know what stability policing looks like. Otherwise, you will not be able really to come up with some targeted suggestions. We will then split the groups, the 4 groups, and then every group will go in a different room. I think everyone should know in which group they are. If not, there is a list at the entrance on the right with a breakdown of the various working groups. The name of the rooms is just outside the rooms. You can see there. You have Sala Palladio, Sala Pigafetta, Sala Scamozzi, and Sala Trissino. I think the only room where we have a challenge is Sala Palladio, which is this one, because we have post-its, but I don't want to post the post-its on the walls, because I think it will look a bit awkward from the cultural property protection point of view if we put post-its over these frescoes. So I think I will try to get a whiteboard in tomorrow. I think from my side, I think tomorrow we can be a little bit flexible with the timetables. Maybe we will be, after these 2 presentations, we will have the first panel discussion, and then maybe we can merge 2 coffee breaks in one. But I think we will manage, to be honest. We are all adults, so we can be flexible enough to do this. Tomorrow at 4:30, there will be a cultural event. So unless it's pouring down with rain, I hope not. You will be offered a guided tour of Vicenza. The center of Vicenza is quite small. It's here in the back, so that's going to be quite interesting. Until 6 o'clock in the evening, or 1800 hours, depends what you're used to. And then this will give you time to change, refresh a little bit. And then at 7:30, so 1900 hours and 30, we will be here for the official dinner. And then, after the official dinner, we will close. Let's not have too much fun, because we'll have to show up the next day. So on Thursday, the 18th of November, we will open at 8:30. I will give a general wrap-up on what happened, more or less, the day before. I will be one of the moderators, but, and this is one important thing, the moderators will not be presenting the outcomes of the panels, because we need a volunteer per group to present the outcomes of the panel. So I already have a couple of volunteers in mind, but I don't want to bias. I can only exclude it will be me, so somebody will be a volunteer in my group. So from 8:40 to 10 o'clock, there will be 4 20-minute sessions where each group will present the results of the SWOT analysis. And then during the coffee break, what I will do, I will combine the 4 SWOT analyses. While you're having coffee and you're having cakes, I'll be working here, combining the SWOT analysis. So I would like you to think of me while you're having the coffee.
We'll give you a towel.
Yes, a towel for the sweat, please. And possibly a paracetamol. And then we will meet back here at 10:30. We will convey back here, and I will present the outcomes of the SWOT analysis to our director, because then it will be his task, so we will give the ball to the director, and it's going to be his ungrateful task to address ACT with the outcomes of the conference, hoping we will really manage to achieve something concrete. So with this, as I mentioned this morning, I think I'm a chatterbox, so I tend to speak too much. So I'm done for now. So please, sir, the floor is yours if you want to.
Thank you so much, Dave. Without further ado, I think that it's time to dismiss you all, because it was a very long but very fruitful day, and we managed not to kill you by a fire squad of PowerPoints. At least it was a little bit dynamic. So I wish you enjoy your evening and the night in Vicenza. I remember that the city center is a UNESCO heritage site itself. Unfortunately, we cannot take you to the Teatro Romano, the Roman theater, tomorrow, because in winter time it closes very early in the afternoon. However, I trust that you will enjoy the cultural event tomorrow in the city center. So the guide is very professional, and they will provide you with plenty of information. So just in case, 112 is the emergency number. I hope that you don't need it, but be cognizant that although it's a very safe city, you are a foreigner, so you can be a target. So be vigilant, and if you can, stay in two whenever you walk around the city. And watch your back, as usual. So these are the COP advice, and thank you so much. On Tuesday, I will thank all the staff which made this event possible. You know, as being cops by trade, you know, in the law enforcement by trade, it is not our job. No, we enjoy in chasing criminals and doing other stuff, not organizing events. However, it's a challenge. We have to be flexible, and this shows that, I mean, so far I can say that you did a great job, Stefano, Dave, Ivan from the IS, my deputy Kadir, who oversaw all the activities during my somehow absent, although I was virtually present, Marco Argentone, and all the other staff, Olga, my personal assistant, the ILS section, I see Massimo, Antonio. I need to name them, sir, so forgive me, I will do it again. Aldo Rosa, the warrant officer, Massimo, I mentioned Massimo is showing up over there. There is Bob, your chaperone at the airport, the Fincon, Luca, and Angelo and Giovanni. So, you know, behind anything there is an organization, but the organization is comprised of human beings. And for me, all these human beings are something more than human beings. I would say close friends or even mates sometimes. So kudos to you all, and enjoy the evening again. And thank you for surviving this first day. Tomorrow will be far lighter. So all the best to you all. Bye. Mattia, ce l'abbiamo fatta. Allora, David Ellero